from April 26th.
I'll make a motion to approve the public minutes from April 26, 2023.
I'll second that.
Okay, moved by MJ, seconded by Stephen. Any corrections to those public minutes from April 26th?
The times just look weird.
Can you pull your microphone a little bit closer for people at home?
Yeah, the times look weird. It's 6:01. We started at 6:30, which just doesn't. Maybe there's a 3 left off or something.
It should definitely be there.
Okay.
I called me at 6:32, so yeah, probably was 6:30 that you called it,
Yeah.
6:32.
Okay, thank you.
Happens again on the.
Okay, we'll get to that in just a second. All right, any other corrections for the April 26th minutes? You said you had
Yeah,
Tim?
I would ask that on page 6, it says Tim presented the general assurances as included for board review. I would like that to say general assurances and program assurances. We did 2 different documents. These minutes get uploaded to the grants portal, so we want to make sure that they don't.
General assurances and
Program assurances. Yeah.
And then I have one under 10A, after you finish. 10A. 10A. So the board agreed to follow, just say current policy in place and not create an additional policy. Thanks. Any other corrections? Okay, so all those in favor of accepting the motion to approve the April 26th public minutes as amended? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 to 0. Thank you. We need one more motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the public hearing minutes from April 26, 2023.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by MJ, seconded by Steve.
So I think that, again, you probably just close the public hearing at 6:32, not 6:30.
And opened at
You
6:30.
opened it, you haven't closed.
Yeah, so- yeah, there should be
3. Okay. Any other changes? Okay. All right, all those in favor of approving the Wednesday, April 26th public hearing minutes? Okay, 8 to 0, thank you. And still
There's
one
non-public.
more, right?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the non-public minutes from April 26, 2023.
I'll second that.
Okay, moved by MJ, seconded by Steve. Go ahead.
So under others present, there's a yes next to Tim Ball. I think that just needs to be deleted because it looks like he voted and he's not a voting member. Sorry, Tim.
There's also Kevin Cantor.
Oh.
It's either Kevin or it's Cantor.
Who does non-public minutes? That's Mary.
That's Mary.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I don't need to write it.
You
No,
don't,
you're
nope,
good.
you're good. So we'll make those changes. All right, all those in favor of the non-public, or voting to accept the non-public minutes as revised, please raise your hands. Okay, 8 to 0. Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on to nominations, renominations, resignations. Are there any questions? Yes, let's make a, go ahead. Let's have a motion first.
I will make a motion to approve the nominations and resignations dated May 10th, 2023.
I'll second that.
All right, moved by MJ, seconded by Steve. Now, do we have any questions?
I do.
Pull your mic closer.
So I noticed during budget, we were talking about enrichment. And then now the person who is doing enrichment is moving to a teacher position. So my question is, who's going to do enrichment? Or is there a plan for that? I guess we don't have anybody who can answer that.
Well, I can speak to the context of it.
Okay.
So during budget, we were talking about, there was a request to increase the enrichment
Right.
to a 0.8, I believe. So the 0.4 was already in the budget and had been for years. So that 0.4 enrichment will now be posted to see if we can find somebody.
and she'll stop doing it.
Right. Sky has gone, she took the third grade teacher, the new third grade teacher position that was in the budget.
Got it.
So she
And
applied for and got that job.
So is she starting mid-stride to the year, or this is for next year?
This starts for the next, these are all for next year.
Got it, okay. Okay, understand.
Any other questions, comments on the nominations? Okay, all those in favor of accepting the nominations? Oh, Steve has a question. No, you're just ready?
You're asking all in
Sorry.
favor? Being efficient.
All those in favor of accepting the nominations and resignations for May 10th, raise your hands. All right, 8-0, thank you. You're so efficient. Okay, so that moves us to our student report.
Good evening. Hello. Student report. School life at Lebanon High School has been good. Our sophomores, juniors, and seniors have been taking our AP tests in the past week and further into this week. I have my world history exam tomorrow, actually, at 7 in the morning. Yep. Our Connecticut River Valley qualifying team for track just went down yesterday, actually, to race, and they did well, I heard. Our lacrosse team is doing well, which is a surprise to all of us because they apparently didn't have enough kids, but we're happy for them, so that's good. Our baseball team is having their senior night today, and our seniors that we're celebrating are Francis, Dawson, Sam, Bates, and someone else. Yeah, from the baseball team. Yep. We are celebrating Teacher Appreciation Week at Lebanon High School, so we've had many letters of teacher appreciations come in. Our student council is doing a special surprise for our teachers on Friday, I believe. We are going to Lebanon Middle School on the 15th to talk about student council elections for them for the 8th graders when they rise up to the high school next year. Our council has just had their elections, so there are going to be new people, and there's still going to be some old people on council, so that's good. Any questions? Anything I missed?
How was prom?
Oh, yes, prom. I didn't go. But prom walk was apparently fun for the people who went. Prom was fun at the Fireside Inn. A couple of my friends went. There was food, there was dancing, there was a stink bomb. There was a stink bomb. But a lot of people had fun at prom. The preparation to prom was also a very large undertaking for our school, which is good. The prom sales were good. People who went to prom enjoyed it, so that's good. The girls' softball team is doing well, according to some of my friends on the girls' softball team.
Any other questions for Jen?
About school.
Good luck on your test tomorrow.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay. All right, that leads us to item 8, the SAU leadership team update, the business administrators update.
So the other thing I wanted to talk about now, and I see a discussion and action under 10, so I don't really know if the board has to make a motion, but it's not going to hurt to do it when we get to that. So we've been talking to Diane and Joanne. We've been seeing some movement in the substitute market, and so we wanted to let you know and certainly you guys are the ultimate deciders, but we wanted to raise our rates for next year. I don't think it's too late to raise the budget, but I don't think we really need to. It's really, budget-wise, we're doing okay, but we see Hanover and we see Mascoma paying $125 a day for both teachers and para subs. The phenomenon that's happening in Lebanon, besides the challenge of getting subs for our current rate, is that because of our the good provision in our support staff contract that pays paras $4 an hour more when they take a teacher sub, which is good, but it has an inadvertent effect of we have someone coming, they sign up to be a teacher sub, and they get to the school, and the para is doing the sub job, so they're certainly welcome to do the para job, but it pays less. So that can cause some tension. So we think that going to a rate of some of our neighbors and standardizing it, they used to be standardized in the past. If those of you have been around a while, before COVID, we paid everybody $12 an hour. Now we pay $14 for teachers and $12 for paras. We would like to go to $125 a day, which comes out a little different. It's like 17-ish, it averages out. I mean, teachers work 7 hours a day and paras work 7 hours a day, teachers work 7.5. So the hourly rate on that figure is more for a para than a teacher, but you're there a little longer. And again, most of the teaching jobs are being filled by paras. So next year, a para who fills in for a teacher will get at least $20.91 an hour. So we think this is a good place to be that matches some of our competitors, moves the market where it might be, and we might hopefully be able to keep it, because if you're a sub and you're registered with a couple of different schools, you're tending to go towards the places where you're going to get $125 a day. You could show up to Lebanon thinking you're going to get $105 a day and end up with $84 a day, which is what our para rate is now. So I think it works in our favor to do that. So we've been talking about it for a month. Didn't make it on the agenda last meeting, so we wanted to tell you about it this time. So, any questions?
And the budget implication?
Well, we're almost $19,000 good in the black on the sub line together. We're over on the teacher sub line because but we're way under on the para sub line. So I don't think it's going to have an impact that's significant. If we have $335,000 budgeted for subs, all told, and so worst case scenario, if we're $10,000 over or something, it's not unwieldy. But the last time we raised it to 14 and 12, it didn't have an impact at all. So I'm not too scared about going up.
So this won't happen this year?
We talked about it early enough to maybe hit the end of the year, but we're a month out. We think that we'll be okay, and we'll just start it next year fresh.
So you're able to get subs?
We're doing okay between the $4 we're paying, kids coming back from college now. It's not great. It's not where we want to be, but it's better than it was a month and a half ago.
Okay.
So when you pay the existing para the additional bump to take on the teaching duties for the day, does that additional bump come out of the subline, or is that just coming out of the regular?
No, it comes out of the subline. Yeah.
So you do a split
Right.
entry.
Makes Heidi's job fun.
So we're going to talk about this we have discussion and action under 10A. So we'll let Tim go on with the rest of his report, and if you have additional questions, we'll talk about it when we get to that point.
That's all I have. I'm good.
Oh, that's it?
Pending your questions. Yeah.
You have nothing else? No,
No.
nothing. Never mind. Okay, so that brings us to unfinished business. So we'll start, we've got the second reading.
can I
Yes.
ask
Oh, actually, I have a question. I'm sorry. Just kidding. I have a question for Tim. Darn. So, well, the question I had was, I noticed that we started the traffic reversal for the Hanover Street High School project, and I was just wondering, I thought when we had talked about it before in finance and facilities, that wasn't going to start until during the summer, and so I just wondered why it was starting now, like why we had sort of started in May to reverse the traffic.
Well, We started it because they set the fence today, and now it's not very wide back there. It's interesting you say that you remember conversations saying it would start a little later, because Steve and I were discussing that we seem to experience a couple weeks creep up. And it's not that it's bad, the sooner you get in there, the better, but that just confirms what we thought, is like, wait, I thought we were gonna go a little later than this. So I don't have a good answer for you, except that the fence was coming, and, you know, they wanted to mobilize, and we said we could do it, so.
So I have a question, since we're on construction topics. I had remembered reviewing the New Hampshire Department of Ed Manual for Planning and Construction of School Buildings, dated 2006.
Impressive.
And so I went back just to look at it, and I came across the clerk of works or an owner's rep. And so I'm curious if we have somebody in that role for the work that's being done at the high school and Hanover Street School.
We do not.
So is that something that we should be thinking about? Should we task finance and facilities with sort of looking into that? Do we need to do that sooner than later? What kind of cost?
Can you tell us what the role, either one
Oh.
of you tell us what the role actually
So,
is?
on the Department of Ed, New Hampshire Department of Ed, it says, there's a question, do we need a clerk of the works? And it says, all major construction projects should be overseen by a representative for the owner who has no direct financial investment in the project outcome. The clerk of the works should be on site on a daily basis to ensure that the work is done in accordance with the contract and in the best interest of the owner. Architects and construction managers are responsible for contractor performance, but they also have their own interest to protect, are consequently, are not, they didn't word this correctly, are not able to be completely unbiased, according to the Department of Ed. So considering that we're talking about a $14 million project over a span of a couple of years, and I think we had one for this building, so I'm
Correct.
curious sort of like why we haven't really talked about that, or are we too late in the process?
Well, I don't know the answer to the second part. Typically, a owner's representative, clerk of the works, would come on board, you know, pre-bidding. Personally, I think it's a good idea to look into and try to do some research on putting an RFQ out and seeing what's out there. I mean, I think that I know that the thinking was, you know, this project is very tight, and, you know, it can be, you know, it would be high five figures probably for an owner's rep, just going off of my experience of the one that was here, was also the one in Claremont when I was in Claremont. And that was a $12 million project, and I think his fee was $50,000, but that was 10 years ago. So that's why I'm thinking probably $80,000, $90,000. So, you know, is it late? Typically, yes. Does that mean that we shouldn't do it? I think it's probably worth looking into. I know that, you know, when money was really tight, can we do it without an owner's rep, clerk of the works, and save that money? Yes. I mean, the fact is we'd have to sort of enumerate how we would pay for it. But I don't necessarily think it's, generally I think it's I thought it's a good idea right along, but I can see why saving money is important. But things like the project moved up 3 weeks, you know, the contractor's great. The contractor's desire is to do the project that we asked him to do on time and on budget. And that's great, but, you know, someone who can advocate every day saying, I know it's going to help you, but we need 2 more weeks if we do. It's just a for instance, you know. So, you know, my personal opinion as a business administrator is I'd recommend we see what we can do. Maybe I could get some RFQs and see what's out there. You know, I actually, you know, I haven't done it in a long time, so shopping for one is something that I have to think about for a day or two.
Is that something that then we could do tonight, sort of say, Tim, please go do this? Or is that something we should be tasking finance and facilities to sort of
I think
do? Like what is the best process?
probably tasking me to to do some research to present the finance of facilities so we don't delay it 3 weeks.
Okay.
Might be a good idea, and
Okay.
put it on the agenda for finance of facilities.
And maybe set up finance, because I don't think we were intending to have another meeting, but maybe schedule one for like June 1st or something.
You read the DOE manual on this. Is this a recommended position to have, or is this you need to have this position?
I don't think it's required. I'd have to find the page now. It's like 100-page one.
So my knowledge of that is that it's guidance, but when there's building aid involved, that guidance becomes much more required. There's no building aid involved. So.
Plus, it's good sense.
It's, right.
Well, and it's somebody that represents, the way I understand it, it's somebody who's looking out for us and keeping us informed and.
Well, I think that they actually did a good job describing it. With the contractor and the architect, they both work for us, but they do have, interests that are specific. And an owner's rep is someone who, or clerk of the works, they're interchangeable but not, I guess. But they know the industry, they know the lingo, they know what to look for. They're not doing like soil samplings and stuff, but they're there and they have the time, because that's what they're hired to do, and they have the expertise to be able to interface with the people on your behalf. That's all they do is look out for you.
So I almost wonder if we tasked you with that, maybe instead of waiting for finance and facilities, because we know we have another board meeting, if you could get back to us by that board meeting.
Okay.
Because then, also, I'm just thinking about like transitioning with a new superintendent coming on, but not coming on until July, and so it seems like that would be a good person to get on board sooner rather than later.
I will.
I don't know what.
Yes.
The next board meeting's in 2 weeks. I think that's more reasonable than a finance and facility meeting's going to happen.
So I would tag team with Steve to make
Yeah.
sure to get it. Quite frankly, my daughter's graduating college next week, and I'm gonna miss a couple days. So.
But I think there's also, I think, because Wendy sent me this list, I think that there's also a list there of people that they recommend or that they have, so that there's a place to start.
Yeah, right.
If the person that you know is, there's many.
Yeah, I don't know if the guy's still doing it, but
Right.
we
So
got
does-
some contacts.
So do you want a motion, or do you feel like you have a sense of what we want?
I think that,
Does the board sort of generally feel like this is something we want? I don't think we have to have a formal
Yeah.
motion and vote, but like, does
Yeah.
anybody oppose?
Well, I mean, I suppose in general, the principle is a good idea. Sounds like it's good sense, but if you come back and find out that the market has changed and now it's $200,000 for that position,
Well, he's not going to make.
maybe
any
we need to
choices
rethink
until-
about it.
I think I would research and find some people that do this, find out what the going cost is for this side of the project, and find out if the timing is too far gone. It's late, but I don't think, we haven't started anything, so I don't think I would assume that that's not an issue.
And the RFP would be clearly delineated when you come back
Correct.
in 2 weeks? Okay.
Well, I wouldn't come back with an RFQ for approval.
So you'd comfort with information.
I'd come back with information, and then I would want you to tell me to draft an RFQ, and then we could, frankly, I would have it pretty much done. I would just want to tweak it and put it out.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because it seems like we should know what you're asking for that position to do, or somebody should know. I don't know.
So, all right, I can come with an RFQ, a sample RFQ.
Yeah.
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 And I'm,
Kevin had something, sorry, go
I was just
ahead.
gonna say, in the previous experience with the middle school, I mean, did it feel like it paid for itself? I mean, did you get?
You mean oh yeah.
Well, I was in a different district then. I can speak to my time again with the same person, and I was brand new to education, but I thought it was invaluable. I watched these meetings where he knew what to ask and how to pry. And the architect and the owner's rep were there. I mean, the architect and the contractor and he were there in the room with others, but they'd get in these conversations. So I found it valuable. His knowledge was, that guy had he used to run a construction company, that's what he did. So, and then we had another one for the Unity project that I wasn't quite as impressed with. So, anyway, I found it valuable. And I think they would say here, I know that here that there was some problems, or the field behind here we had to redo that a couple years ago. And my understanding is the board, basically the project was out of money and the board said, basically get it done and moved on. So I don't know how true that is, but that's the word I got, that it, didn't taste as good at the end, but it was really kind of a wrap it up kind of move. None of us were on the board, or here then, so it's not our fault.
So,
Wendy, you're.
so I can, if people are interested in this manual, and probably at least the finance and facilities group should have it, I'll send you the link and then you can share it with the rest of us.
At least the relevant section.
It's,
The 160.
no, you get all 200 pages.
You have to get, but she can tell you what page it's on. But there's lots of pages to read.
But it goes through like this, like how to sort of approach the idea that you need construction and then all the different steps and all the buildings and stuff like that. And then, so I mean, it's actually a really interesting manual.
I just caution you, because a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, so just,
But it just, at least to give you some idea of the
Yeah.
things that we should be thinking about or
Sure.
like asking questions around.
And look, we're asking questions and
Yeah.
we're probably, so it's a good thing.
so I will see what I can find out for names and cost, and whether it's too late, and, a sample of what this person would do, sort of an RFQ kind of thing.
And the other question would be, like, if we don't then have that, how are we managing the project, or who is tasked
Right now,
that currently?
in our two construction meetings we had for Hanover Street, it's really a quad team of Ian and Jack and me and Steven interfacing. And that's, none of us are experts, and all of us have a lot of stuff on our plate.
Yeah,
So between the four of us, I think we've done a good job so far, but it's, again, I just think someone that, if you're willing to figure out how to pay for it, if it's not too costly, it could really be helpful.
Okay. That sounds good. All right. Thanks, everyone. Okay, now, moving on to the second readings of the policies. So let's have a motion for each one and talk about them separately, just because I think it'll be cleaner that way. So I need a motion to have a second reading for policy JLCF, wellness policy. Motion to approve. So, motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve policy JLCF, wellness policy revised.
Okay, motion by MJ, can I get a second? Steve, you second? Second by Steve. Okay, so, does anyone have any questions? Yes, MJ.
So I have two questions, I guess. One, under section E, celebration and rewards. Says food and beverages will not be used as a reward or withheld as a punishment for any reason. So I guess I'm a little concerned not to use as a reward, because I know like in the elementary school, they've had popcorn parties when everybody has good behavior, or they fill their bead jar. So does this mean now, is that considered a reward? And so now the teachers can't do things like that? I mean, I think food can be used in a healthy way, and making a healthy snacks to build classroom community and instill the behaviors you want. So I guess I'm a little concerned about that, how we came to that language.
The federal government came to that language. It needs to be in there if we're going to take USDA money. I don't think that's an ad. It's not highlighted. None of us are naive. I know it happens, but it's not supposed to happen. And if we don't show a policy to the USDA saying we don't allow it, then I'm going to be back saying we have a finding from our USDA audit. So I totally agree with everything you just said.
Wink, wink, we're not gonna
No,
abide by
it needs to be a bidden by. It's ultimately up to the principals to make sure that policies are followed in their schools. I'm just saying that, I'm sure it's happening, but it's not supposed to.
And I think there has been actually quite a bit of movement away from that in a lot of at least a lot of celebrations I've seen recently. So people are attempting to do that, which is difficult.
Yeah, and then I just had one more under, which you're probably going to tell me is a government one too, but under, what is it, Roman numeral 4? Oh, actually, that's weird. We go from, I guess it's a new section 8. Roman so numeral 4, physical activity. Physical activity during the school day, including but not limited to recess, classroom activity or breaks will not be withheld as a punishment for any reason. And I know in the middle school, according to their handbook, they have lunch and recess detentions. And so for me,
So we asked that question at policy, and once we approve this policy, it will go to the principals, and that practice will change, is what we understand.
so then will there also be, I guess, an amendment to the handbook? Because it's in the handbook that we already approved, I believe, for the 2023-24 school year. So we're going to,
Does it just reference the policy, or does it actually state?
it actually says lunch and recess detention
So-
in the middle school handbook.
Right, so they'll have to change, but it's a digital, I mean, they'll have to change it, but, yeah, okay. So we just need to note that will, not only will they need to have it, but that will have to change it.
And I don't know, Joanne did say that she would be chatting with principals and stuff like that to let them know that change in the policy, because I asked the exact same question.
Thanks.
Yep.
Any other observations about this policy, questions, concerns? There were a bunch of grammatical things which I've already given to Tim, so big surprise. I think I had one more. Let me see if I did.
Well, the birthday parties, did you all note that? That you're supposed to just have one birthday party per month?
I think we asked about that. Yeah, sorry.
Encouraged. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was the answer that Joanne gave, is that it's encouraged, it's not required. So.
Okay, any other comments about this one? Okay, so all those in favor of approving JLCF Wellness Policy Revised? All right, 9-0, thank you. All right, can I get a motion for the next one? JBCD.
A motion to approve policy GBCD, background investigation and criminal history records check revised.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion by MJ, seconded by Steve. Does anybody have any questions about this one?
Again, this one is required by law, so it's a priority, and so reflects the laws, the requirement. And it also, is it this one that there's like a provisional contract now, or is it the next one? Must be the next one.
I'm thinking about under 3.
The final offer, yeah. So now there's the change that there will be a conditional offer of employment, the background check and all that will go through, and then there will be a final offer employment for any employee now. So that will be a change in our process.
And they won't be working until the background check is back and...
I think they'll work, will they?
I think they could work, but it's conditional employment until it's finally gone through, if I'm correct. Because right now, especially the background checks are pretty backlogged and taking a long time, and we don't want to have to wait. But it would just be conditional, not that final formal offer, right?
Yeah, I think
Almost
one
like
of
a
the questions
probation period,
that we
right?
had was, I think the police station has access to being able to do fingerprinting electronically, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we asked, is there a way at some point where we can, instead of having to manually do it and send our records in, if that could be one thing that we could talk to the city and see if there could be any coordination of services around.
So in theory then, to your point, if there's a backlog that takes weeks to months to get a background check, you could have someone provisionally approved and working with kids who hasn't had a background check, and it could take months later we find out, oh no, there's an issue.
Well, I think it already
That's
already
what happens
happens.
now.
So is there a provision that they can't be unsupervised with the kids pending their background check?
Is there any restriction when someone hasn't had their check done yet?
No, we don't offer a conditional Well, we tell everybody, we're gonna put it in writing, it's conditional, we fingerprint you, and then you can start right after that. Fingerprints are coming back faster now than they used to, but that's because we changed some internal processes. But yeah, you theoretically could work with someone for 2 months. I guess I'm just observing.
So I have a question, because you can actually look for people on social media and find all kinds of things about them that you wouldn't have without, even with a fingerprint. And so I'm wondering, is there any within the HR department, if there's any of that going on where people are being checked through all of their digital fingerprint? Because it's easy to find out if there's already places nationally where the person has problems.
No, there's not an HR.
You might want to check the ethics on that.
Yeah.
I know for me, I cannot do that to people who want to be my client as a therapist. So I know that, like, as a social worker, I have a different code of ethics, but I would double check.
If the board wanted us to do something formal, then I would have to check with a lawyer, see what we can
Yeah.
do. But we are not, in the HR department, we are not. But the way our process works now is that it's decentralized pretty much on purpose. So if there's a teacher needed at Mount Leb, we do the posting centrally, but then the applicants are viewed and reviewed and screened at Mount Leb, for instance. And once they say they pick somebody, they send a completed packet over. They usually close out the posting, although we can do it if they don't. And then we process the packet. So our HR department, which is one guy and me, we process what comes in versus have any role to play in who we choose or anything like that. So I don't know what the hiring managers do as a practice as far as social media and stuff. My first reaction is, we gotta be careful, make sure we do it something that's ethical and legal. And public employees sometimes have different rules than private. So
Right,
too,
right.
So if the board wanted to go down that road, we would just have to check carefully.
Well, it's not, I mean, so for myself hearing this, it's very worrisome. I work in a place where people have to have background checks before they can spend time with children. And I would, as a parent, I would want to know if people that are around my kids are worrisome, predators, addicts, whatever it is. And I guess I don't know how everybody feels about it, but it feels to me like, with the wealth of information that's available, if it were legal, it seems like a good idea to at least know whatever we can know, and especially around children. I mean, having a DWI is a very different thing than having a previous record with molestation or some other thing that is, you can completely find that stuff by Googling now. You can.
Well, that's actually a good, I mean, that's a different question, right? Like the sexual predator database, like that, I think anybody can at any time check that, because that database is public, it's supposed to be public, right? So I don't think there's a legal issue with checking that if you were
But
checking
if it's
that.
not in our policy to do
Right.
so, then it would.
I mean, I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I do believe there needs to be, like Tia said, a more formal process, because you could also get a slippery slope as someone that, is married to someone that is part of a second and a third in a family. You can easily get mistaken identity too, and wrong birthday could get crossed. So at least having a formal criminal back check process, you're getting rid of hopefully the mix-ups with the juniors, the seniors, the seconds, the thirds, and the birth dates. Whereas just doing on social media, they don't always get that far down.
So how about we change the ask to the database, and we leave it at that, because at least that would be one filter of something that we could do in the meantime.
Can I just want to make sure I'm understanding, because I feel like I'm playing catch up here a little bit. Am I understanding that when we make the offer of employment and we have we're going to do a background check, but there's the backlog, but we're currently allowing people to enter those positions and start working unsupervised with children in our district who have not completed their background checks. Am I stating that correctly?
So a huge percentage of the people we hire is this time of year, and they start in September. They're getting fingerprinted now, and their background will be back before they darken the door. We do background checks on everybody we hire, all coaches, all teachers, everybody. We do background checks on every designated volunteer, which is a volunteer who may have any chance to be alone with a child. If you're
Bus drivers.
that's an employee. But if you're a parent who's going to the Hood Museum with a group, we won't background check that. If you get hired in mid-year, there's an immediate vacancy, you are allowed to let someone start working pending the result of their background check. I suppose, I mean, we're not getting areas where we need to talk to our labor lawyer. I suppose you can close that loophole and you run the risk of there being no one in that position for weeks or months. So, I'll do what the board says, but we would need to check carefully with our attorneys as to what we're allowed to do.
So-
And tread carefully.
I think I just want to make sure that we're drawing I feel like we're talking about two separate things and we're starting to conflate them a little bit. Like the concept of doing a sort of unsupervised random social media check strikes me as that's a conversation. Maybe we should have it, maybe we shouldn't, but that's one issue. A formal background check and the timing of a start date around a formal background check is a different issue. So I think if we just kind of pull those two things apart, this is one that we have policies around and we're talking about, maybe we should consider tightening it. This is a separate, potentially very new thing. I think, I guess I am concerned by the fact that we do have, it seems like kind of a little bit of a gap in the policy. To me as a parent, it seems like there's I kind of presume that when I send my kids to the school that the people who are there have all been background checked and are cleared, and if that's not actually accurate, I think, I'm saying, I understand we're saying it doesn't happen very often and whatever, but if it's possible to close that loophole, I would certainly be interested in having that conversation.
Is the background check purely the fingerprint check, or are there other steps that are taken too?
We do fingerprints, we send them off to the New Hampshire department that runs, they check, it's an FBI check that we send them to Concord, and we get.
Or just New Hampshire?
What's that?
Or just New Hampshire?
New Hampshire runs it, but they do an FBI check nationwide.
My guess is, so I've had to do safe sport things, and I think the actual background check probably happens through that FBI database pretty quickly. The fingerprints, I think, is what takes a little longer.
Well, they go together. So it used to take, if it's been a while, we had a process where we took fingerprints and we sent them in together. So you paid us the money for it because it cost $50, and we sent them in. And what we eliminated is now, and we did this 3 years ago. Now you write a check right to the Department of Safety, and we send your stuff off daily. So what used to take, literally could take a couple months. It's down to, I'd have to ask Xavier, but it's down to a couple weeks now between the mail and them doing their check. So it's not nearly the long period of time it used to be, because that was scary. And getting us out of the middle of taking your money in and then writing another check was a big, it sounds like a little thing, but it was a big deal. We looked into live scan before, which is what you're referring to with the digital fingerprints. It's been probably before COVID that we looked into it. We can look into it again. It's very pricey and wasn't going to do what we thought it was going to do. It was basically almost instant. But it's been long enough now that I don't remember the details of it. We can look into it again.
And can we, because I think when it came up in conversation at policy, it seemed to be that potentially Hanover does it through their police department. So is that a question that we can also, in addition to maybe finding out the cost, would there be a way that the police department could handle?
I can ask.
And get an idea of how quickly they get their stuff back?
I believe there is a difference between criminal background checks and identity checks, right? You can do a criminal background check through, I've done it also for Safe Sport, And that's just based off your social security number. There's no fingerprinting involved.
Right.
So I think when you fingerprint, it's a different level of check.
And just so for context, the law got changed a couple years ago by some superintendents lobbied New Hampshire State House, because a few years ago, I mean, like in the last 5 years, they used to just tell you if there was some sort of sexual crime. And so there was this teacher that was actually had a felony conviction for robbery, actually got caught doing something sexual at this school. And so they're not related, but they never would have hired him if they knew he had a record like that. So they did change it, so they do a bigger check now than they used to just a few years ago. So trying to give you some good news that the loopholes are closing, you know. I feel we take it pretty seriously, and I recognize that there is somewhat of a gap. But there's, there should be no gap. In the real world, I don't know if that's possible. I mean, sometimes we're desperate for someone to get in the classroom,
I wonder if there's like an intermediate thing where it's
Yeah.
like for, mid-year hires, of which presumably there are a ton, there's like, I don't know enough about the process, but like maybe there's a sort of, this will cover a lot of instances, or we're willing to pay a higher fee for those smaller number of mid-year checks or something. It just feels like something worth.
Another option might be that we just, and again, we have to talk about the legality of this, but I think that we stipulate that they will not be unsupervised, right? So, which would be pretty straightforward for most of our positions. I think the only ones that it would be really difficult for might be bus drivers, because there's not going to be someone supervising those, but for classroom positions or in-school positions of any kind, even a one-on-one para, there's a way that those can be supervised the entire time, so maybe that's what we need to stipulate. It's just that we feel more comfortable that during that interim conditional period that they're not unsupervised.
So the question is, should that be stated in this policy, or is that the conditional, like in our conditional offer of employment contract, would it be stated there?
That's like maybe an HR question, or?
It seems like if this whole policy is dealing with criminal history records check, it seems like that would be a stipulation that you put in this policy, because you're waiting for the criminal record check to come back.
So I think that the recommendation, based on our conversations at policy, and given that policy is not slated to have a meeting until, is that we adopt this policy because it's priority and required, and then as is, because at least it does change the conditional, so that we implement a conditional offer of employment. And I think that's probably important for this round of people we're hiring. And then if we need to modify it, we can modify it further.
Does that sound good to everyone? Okay, all right, so we have, okay, sorry. So MJ has another question about this policy, so let's deal with that, because we're still talking about this policy.
Nothing to do with timing a background check. Moving on. Number 2B, under substitute teachers, I'm wondering what the intent of the sentence was. Applicants for substitute teaching positions who have submitted to a CHRC within 3 years in any district within the SAU shall not be required to undergo. So does that mean any district in the SAU is someone who's subject to the area agreement, or did it really mean any district in the catchment area of SAU? So it would be like the Muskoma, or someone in the greater Upper Valley that's in the substitute pool. We only have one district in the SAU.
Tia, we asked this question too. Do you, I think the thought was, even if they're coming from Grantham or Plainfield, that they should go through our process, if I'm remembering.
I think that's what we had determined at the end, right? Because I think there was that difference, and, sometimes we get substitutes from a different place, but, it is our district, and we want to make sure our kids are safe.
So isn't this one saying though that they don't have to?
Can you tell me where you are again?
2B.
Okay.
It's the bottom of page 3.
Okay.
That policy.
Oh, yes. All right.
Right, so this sentence is saying that if they're coming from any district in the SAU, which I would assume it means Grantham and Plainfield,
No,
No.
I wouldn't assume that.
Okay, so this is really confusing then, like that, the sentence doesn't,
So-
so we're saying where they're not required to undergo additional CHRC, or we?
I know where this is coming from, and so maybe you want to delete this sentence.
Okay.
A lot of SAUs have multiple districts. SAU6, where I used to work, is Cornish School District, Claremont School District, Unity School District, at least it was. So SAU6, if you work for Cornish, under this, you could also work for Claremont. SAU88 is a single district SAU, and so this sentence as written doesn't apply to SAU88. It's actually one of the best things about SAU88 is it's one district. So Plainfield and Cornish are different SAUs. I mean, Plainfield and Grantham, and we make them get background checks. You could be working at Mascoma, pick your district, you could be working at Grantham yesterday and work for us today. You're not working to get a background check. I just had one 2 weeks ago. I don't care. I mean, we're trying to be safe.
Right, so then that becomes the question of, is that what we want, or do we want to include
Well, and
our sending schools?
And I think, again, this is sort of tricky because it's a legal, this is more of a, I think we would want to run that through legal counsel to see.
What kind of liability?
Right,
we have.
because this, I think, is specifically written because of the way that the law is written. So it's not, it's sort of like the USDA thing, you know, this was maybe one of those policies. I'm not sure where our wiggle room is to,
It doesn't really seem like it's a problem, though. I mean, I think we're saying it's
Right.
redundant, but not a problem.
Right.
Because it's within any district within SAU88. Well, that's just
No, but it's saying-
SAU88,
But it's
so.
saying that we don't have to go through, but he's saying that we do, so then we're.
But
in
it's,
conflict with
but this is saying applicants who have submitted to a background check in any district within SAU88.
Within the last 3 years.
And that's,
There are no
but there's only one
I
district.
understand, but someone who previously submitted a background check in Lebanon within the last 3 years
Well, do
would
we
not
want-
have to submit
And
again.
that is a change to our current practice, because right now, if your background check is more, if you haven't worked here in a year, we make you redo it. So this is
So
saying
that's
3
not,
years.
so I think that's really where that's where our practice change would be.
Right.
I think we could probably safely ignore the in any district within SAU88,
Right.
but it's the other implications of that sentence that are important.
Correct.
Right. So what are you saying?
I'm saying if it's mandated by law, we don't have a choice, this is the language, so they're mandating a change in our practice.
So we now go for 3 full years?
So we,
our,
If you've been out of the district.
yeah.
but that's the question that we don't know whether that's law or not, right? And that, I mean, I think,
I mean, it does say unless otherwise required by the superintendent. So if we have a policy in place that says we do it every year, then all this says is, well, then guess you do it every year, right?
To be specific, if you haven't worked in a year, you redo it.
But, I mean, I think that this covers, like, if we have a tighter,
Yeah.
Right.
like, net
Right.
than this doesn't disallow that tighter net.
This is setting a minimum.
This just sets a
and
minimum.
We go above and beyond.
Right.
So it
So that should be
feels like,
okay.
again, it's sort of redundant and not really applicable, but fine.
yeah, that makes sense.
I agree.
I had to go through a background check again after being off the board for
Yeah,
a
'cause
little
we
more
have
than a year.
background checks.
I know. But, so we definitely do that.
So are you only provisionally?
No, it was before this policy, so I'm all good. And I'm not employed.
Well, because I think what they're saying is that we don't have to strike it because A, any district doesn't apply to us, and B, our policy as required by superintendent is already tighter. I mean, I agree, it could be tighter language-wise, you know, I love that, but it doesn't they're not mutually exclusive. Okay, all right, let's go back. So now, we are going to,
Can I, quick question? So
Yes.
the original was, do you take background checks from Plainfield and Grantham?
No.
And the answer is no, just schools within SAU88.
yes. Thanks. That was very confusing. All right, so all those in favor of accepting policy GBCD, background investigation and criminal history records check revised? Okay, 9-0 unanimous. Thank you. All right, moving on to the next one.
Make a motion to approve policy EEAE, school bus safety program revised.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by MJ, second by Steve. Does anybody have any questions on this? MJ does.
No, I just have a question for practice, and maybe Tim does or does not know this, but in the first paragraph, it says that students are provided annual instruction. So do we have bus safety drills at all levels of the school? My kid has never come home and said they've had a bus safety drill.
Yeah, they totally do.
I don't know if they do them at the high school, but I know they do. I think things got messed up because of COVID, but. they
My
do.
daughter had one at Hanover Street.
Yeah, and they have them at middle school every year.
Yeah.
So yes, I don't know about the high school, but.
I guess we should check
I
on
don't,
that.
I don't
though, if the
think
high
for
school-
high school, I've never heard of.
Yeah, I've never heard of it. So, yeah, question.
Right, so
Definitely
that's
they
all
have them
students,
a
so
lot before
we should
they
check
get to
on
high school.
if they're not having it in high school, if they are.
Well, if
if
they
they
drive
aren't,
themselves, yeah.
then they should, to be policy compliant. That's a good question. Any other comments or questions on this one? Okay, all those in favor of accepting policy EEAE, school bus safety program revised? Okay, unanimous 9-0, thank you. All right, moving on to IJOC.
Make a motion to approve policy IJOC, volunteers revised.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by MJ, seconded by Steven. Does anybody have any comments on this? So I don't, wait, I have to find it, but oh yes, here it is, in B2, under the designated volunteer, so Tim said this earlier, so people who are volunteers for the district, anybody can be a volunteer. The designated volunteer has the background checks, and that is if you're going to be at any time ever one-on-one with a child alone. And I know that as a designated volunteer, having been one in the past, I know that for that one, you are not allowed to come on. You do not volunteer until the background check comes back.
Right.
So it doesn't say that here, though. It just says that we are following these policies, GBCD. But I think our practice is that we don't allow people to become designated volunteers until we have received their background checks. And I think that is good practice and probably should be part of the policy because it makes sense that we can control because it's not an urgent, time-sensitive need. And then we can make sure, and it's a pool that we don't have any other checks
Well,
on.
But it says, before a person may volunteer in a position or perform a function falling within the definition of designated volunteer, such person must undergo a background check. So
But then the policy we just looked at says that they can be conditionally.
I think that's just an employee.
Okay, so as long as we're distinguishing between the conditionality of designated volunteer versus the conditionality of employee, I think that's the only thing I want.
And then do we do what's in the last sentence of that paragraph?
Yes,
Yep. Okay.
yeah. There's it's an online training that you have to do
Yeah,
several times.
Yeah.
You have to
every
renew it.
year you have to do it.
Okay, good. So as long as they jive, which I think they do, I just want to.
So in GBCD, designated volunteer is on page 2-7.
Subject to any additional rules and procedures established by the superintendent. So yes, that goes back to what Jessica said
And
earlier.
then
We
in the
make our
policy-
practice tighter. Sorry, Kevin?
In the policy, they define what a designated volunteer
Right.
is under
Mhm.
right, IJOC,
Okay.
has undergone a background assessment.
So I think we're good.
Okay, good. Just want to make sure. Anybody else have anything to say on IJOC? All right, all those in favor of accepting IJOC volunteers revised, raise your hands. Okay, 9-0, unanimous. Thank you very much. All right, on to KFR.
Motion to approve policy KFR, policies and procedures for use in school buildings and facilities revised.
Second that.
Okay, motion by MJ, second by Steve. Does anyone have anything to say about this policy?
Did we find out an answer about the computer labs?
Well, hesitation tells you that. I'm not sure I know the answer, but I know you guys are worried about using a computer lab, so we said you can't use a computer lab unless the district technology coordinator is, or his designee is supervising. So I think there was some questions like, why even put that in there then? But we thought it was pretty strict enough like this, like, I guess we're gonna move it all together if you don't want anyone to ever use a computer lab, but,
I guess I'm just curious as who that would be, like
I
who,
can't think of anybody that would use it.
But it provides for an opportunity if something were to come up in the future, a creative use for that resource, and we have one of our people supervising.
Yeah, I
We
mean,
have
it
some-
does have
we
a
some high
schedule
fluid
for pay.
Apple computers that do certain sort of graphic sort of stuff. Maybe, I don't know, I can't think of.
I mean, the other issue is that at this point, to use any computer on a campus, you have to have an SAU login. And so even if we let somebody use the room, there would have to be people there with SAU logins to be able to get onto the computers at all. So it's sort of a self-limiting use.
so where is the sentence you were talking about?
It's on the last page, bullet 4.
Yep.
And I have some questions.
I don't see it. I'm being stupid. Okay.
Okay, MJ has one, go ahead.
Well, one is more of a procedure question. Tim, on number 9, it says an invoice will be issued at the close of activity. So does that mean you're going to be there or someone from your office at Saturday when they're done using it, typing up the invoice, here's the hours you used, or should that be at a certain, after 3 business days, or? That type?
I mean, we've been using this for a while, and we, when you reserve space, it generates an invoice if it's applicable. So, I mean, you could change it, but we don't hand them a receipt at Saturday afternoon. But Julie will be like, "Here's your invoice is attached." Or I mentioned the most frequent users of outside space is every 4 years, and for campaigns, I think it says in the campaigns we make them pay up front. But at the close of the activity, I mean, I guess it's not as specific as it could be, but I don't have a problem with, we don't hand you an invoice, but we send you.
So
an email.
do candidates get taken to collections who don't pay?
Maybe this time. I mean, we avoid that now by getting payment up front, because we did get stiffed,
Oh.
and we didn't take them to collections.
Then under, on page 2, I guess at the bottom, when it's talking about the category 3, it says this category includes for-profit as well as a category 1 or 2 that charge admission fees to dances being held, to events. So I'm thinking category 1 is a co-curricular, so what if they're having a dance at the school and they're charging admission? You're suddenly making them a category 3? That doesn't, if the student council is hosting a dance, they're generating revenues and they may donate the money later to a charitable cause, but that doesn't seem to have that exemption. It seems like instead it's making them a category 3.
Yeah, so
That's a good point.
along those same lines, the distinctions in category 1 is super confusing, right? Like, it's very confusing because we are first saying that I think what we're trying to say is that it's Lebanon-based local organizations, right? Lebanon-based activities and programs that benefit SAU. And then we also want to include district contracted organizations, because those are people that we do use, neither of which are mentioned in this as it's written right now. And then at nowhere in this, but it should say, in this first paragraph, no facility use fees will be assessed to all category 1 users. So we have these 3 categories, but we don't actually say, oh, by the way, the people in category 1 don't pay the fees. So looking at the original and looking at this, we cut out a bunch of things, and I think we cut out the thing that actually is the point of this whole having 3 different categories, is these people in category 1 do not pay fees. But our caveat here is that unless they generate revenue or fees, and that goes back to MJ's point, we already do that a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
not prom, but
Well, what
middle school
about football
dances,
games?
football games, they generate revenue, so.
Well, we could modify that with a sentence that addresses that, but I'll go back to the example that generated this in the first time, and I tried to make this, I guess I failed in my effort to make it simpler. that generated this conversation 10 years ago was, you have an AAU organization that benefits the kids. No problem with that. They have an AAU tournament and they charge each team that comes $1,000. That AAU organization is using our gym to get revenues. And there's a difference between practicing in our gyms so your kids can get better and holding a tournament so you can get money. And so that's what we're trying to say is like, just because you're an AAU organization that's benefiting kids doesn't mean you can use our gym and make $10,000 on a weekend. That's the sort of idea we were trying to say. So are we trying to penalize, the dance? Of course not.
But we have to be careful because I think that's what my thing is if you look at this policy, right, it's been revised 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times in the last 10 years. And I think the reason it keeps getting revised is because we are lacking like a philosophy.
It's been reviewed and changed once since I've been here, and that's
Okay.
2016.
So we reviewed it, but we haven't changed, but we know it's been changed since, because it's already changed.
No, it was only changed once.
Only changed once? Okay.
March 16th, 2016.
Okay,
It's
good.
been reviewed in February, but now we're
Maybe
talking
just
about
adopt it. Okay,
So I
that's
have
good.
a question about if there is revenue that's generated.
it. Yeah.
Is there a way to put into this whole paradigm a percentage of payment from the income that's generated by the use of these organizations so that there's kickback that comes to the district? Because it seems like instead of keeping the organizations from generating the money, that we too would benefit, seems like a better.
So if you're generating money in this poorly written document, if you're generating money, you just fall in category 3 and we charge you. So it's not that you can't use our space, we just charge you according to this chart.
I know, but it seems like we stand to make more money if we charged by a percentage of, I don't know. That
No.
just seems like a more business-oriented.
But that goes back to my question is like, that's my question about philosophy. Like, are we looking at our buildings as being a
Assets.
profit generating thing or as a community service or both, right? Or since they're already owned by the taxpayers, like where do we fall on that spectrum? And I think that's what we haven't really articulated, right? So, and I think MJ's point is a good one, is we run into the question of like, we're limiting, which I get and I understand the limiting and I think we should have limits in, but we're not going to be able to we're not going to be able to anticipate every single use case.
Right.
We just can't, right?
But I think that there's a different, I think it's easy to distinguish that anything related to our schools and our co-curriculars and any sort of event that we're putting on for our kids, like, there shouldn't be any charge for that.
Of course.
I think that in Tim's situation, so I think that that's easy to just sort of say blanketly, anything that's tied to the school in any way.
Shouldn't have a charge. No, I mean, you mean like shouldn't be charged building use fees.
Correct.
I agree. I think that would be,
But I think
makes
it's
more sense.
But I think it's okay to charge AAU, Lightning Soccer, blah, 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 like.
But the problem is that like, then that's the problem with these categories, right? Is they are considered a category 1 user because they're a school contracted group to a certain extent.
No, they're not.
No.
So but I mean, they were under the AAU. AAU was under the original category 1.
AAU and Lightning Soccer, as long as they're using their space for practice, they'd be a category 1. If they have a tournament and they charge admission fees, they're category 3.
I mean,
But AAU, Lightning Soccer is a for-profit organization.
It is currently.
So Lightning Soccer, like Joe's team, you're a parent and you pay $600 to join that team.
Yeah.
If you want to use our space to practice, we're not going to charge you for that practice
But why?
because you're benefiting the youth of the kids and you're not getting rich off of using our fields. But when Joe's team joins up with Lightning Soccer Tournament and the tournament wants to host in Lebanon, we would charge. Obviously it's clear in my head and not in my policy. Obviously the attempt is, what I was trying to do in category 1 is try to neaten it up and take away all these specific things. That was this big issue.
And I think that
Right.
you did a good job with that. I think what the problem is not it's not your writing. This is the problem of what we
Policy.
think about this policy, right? Like That's my point, is I don't think that we know what we actually think.
It doesn't.
There are some organizations that I'm sorry, one more thing. There are some organizations that we ask to provide services for. They're category 1. That's what a contract sought by the district are accessible. So, you know, the people doing driver ed make money off that, but we ask them to provide it, so we don't charge driver ed.
After school.
The other big one is after school, is that we don't pay them any money, but we ask them to provide that service.
Sorry, Jessica.
I guess I may just be new enough to this conversation that I'm not familiar with the tension you're describing. It seems to me that as it is, it does actually address that in a way. It's sort of, if we were looking to make a lot of money off of this, if it was primarily an asset sort of play, the fees would be a lot higher. And if we were just treating it as, well, these are the taxpayers' sort of assets and we should let them use whatever we want, we would charge no fees for anything. So I feel like the structure of this does walk that line to me. Like, I think so I have another question, which is about when we refuse certain, like what our policies are. I think in terms of refusing to allow different organizations, particularly category 1 users, when we refuse to let them use the space, I think I'm curious about what that hinges on. It sort of seems like it's basically just the superintendent's discretion, but maybe I'm misunderstanding the policy. So I guess I can table that one until the end if we want to finish this question about the fees, but to me, it seems like it.
I think you're right. I agree. I think it does do that within the one versus 2 and 3.
Yeah.
I think the 2 and 3 is pretty straightforward, and it does distinguish, like, we're still providing a service, these are our fees, they're not enormous, they're not crazy, they're not exorbitant. I think the thing that has been the hang up for me is 1, because we have so many exceptions, and Tim did a good job of trying to eliminate some of those exceptions, but I think MJ's question points to, is this really still what we want to say? Because the way it's written right now, we're just not being specific enough about the people who use it, like the kids who have a student council thing and charge admission.
We can add that, obviously.
Well, no, but I mean, but that's my point.
I know you're raising money, but we're taking it all.
No money for you. Sorry, Steve, you're raising.
No, I mean, you mentioned, like, you know, we should have a philosophy, right? And I guess to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think whether it's articulated or not, the existing philosophy already is, this isn't a revenue generating thing, we charge fees so we don't lose money by allowing you to use our facility, right? It's basically covering our costs. We have to have the lights on, we have to have the HVAC on, we have to have personnel there to clean up afterwards.
And, yeah, I guess more bluntly, my philosophy is we're here to help, but you're not going to get rich off of us. So if we're going to do a yoga class and you're going to charge $100, why shouldn't the district get some of that money?
Go ahead.
Sorry, so I'm still thinking about your last thing. So I think the way, when I read the policy in the category 3, it says as well as category 1 or 2 organizations. And I think we distinguish ourselves from the organizations because we always refer to us as either district or like the city of Lebanon. You know, I think there's clear, like I wouldn't define us under the term.
But if you look at it, we say in category 1, the last sentence is and local organizations, and we mean Lebanon-based organizations. We don't mean district organizations.
So where are you?
The last sentence of category 1 before we get to the bullets. All City of Lebanon departmental uses, including Lebanon Recreation Department use and local organizations that, 1, 2, 3, whatever. So we are talking, and I think what we mean there is not local. I think we mean Lebanon-based, because we do distinguish later between Lebanon-based and not Lebanon-based in category 2. But it's a broader, because again, Tim's trying to respond to a whole list of things that already exist that are exceptions to this rule, that are local organizations that are not school district, that are not LebRec, that are not city.
But I think when we're answering the question of who we charge, any of that under the local organizations that charge a profit would be the ones to get the fee, not the City of Lebanon, not the school district. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I see. It's the way that it's written now, that's not what it says. So we would need to fix that. The way that number 1 is written, because when it says local organizations, these are these are, it's, because why do we distinguish in category 2 about, in bold, non-Lebanon-based services? Because we're distinguishing about Lebanon-based services are included in category 1, non-Lebanon-based services are included in category 2. Those are the same groups. They're just, one is based in Lebanon and one is not based in
So I
Lebanon.
have a question about the differentiation between nonprofit and for-profit organizations, because it feels to me like if you are an organization that's a for-profit organization and you're getting free services here in any of our facilities, this, that seems like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Or if you're for-profit, but you're doing good for the community and you're not charging for your services,
But
we
they
would-
do
we would
charge.
put you
for their-
category
I mean,
one.
the for-profit organizations do charge for their services.
then they would be category 3 because they're charging and making revenue.
But the Lightning Soccer charges
Yeah,
for
so
their
Lightning
services.
Soccer would be 3, and they would pay.
But they
And
wouldn't
they do
for
pay for,
practice.
but he says they don't
They
pay for
wouldn't pay
their
for practice
fields.
time, they would pay to host a tournament, where, because they don't make revenue off the practice time, but they make revenue off
I-
hosting a tournament.
But they do make.
I think the AAU is different because AAU is, like Lightning is more Upper Valley based. So I do think that we would charge them.
I mean,
But
I give that example, and if I'm not understanding the fee structure for them correctly, then I don't want to, that shouldn't derail this whole conversation. My daughter played AAU basketball, and we had to pay to, but I thought, I'm pretty sure the person running the AAU team wasn't getting rich, he was just taking that money to pay for the tournaments we entered. And the real money was being made by the tournament hoster.
Got it.
So that was my
But then
understanding.
that's an interesting question, right? Because it's like the real money. Well, what makes the real money, right? Like who determines
I mean,
like
it was
how
not
much
cheap
is
for
your
me.
profit margin and what is
Well, I
that?
mean, I think that one of the things is that it would be very easy in category 1 to include nonprofit local organizations as as part of the category 1
It is.
grouping, and then the category 3 includes the for-profit groups. I don't know.
Kind of is what it says.
That's what it says.
It's,
Except they
So I guess
just told us that
I don't know how much of an issue this actually is, like in the day-to-day or month-to-month running of this program. Like, I don't know how much of a problem these issues
It's
sort of,
sporadic.
like, so that's one thing I would wonder about, but also to sort of return to the question of the approval or refusal to use the spaces. Am I correct that that resides solely with the superintendent?
Well, it's facility. I mean, if there's some sort of unworkable, some sort of conflict, then it would ultimately lie with the superintendent. But generally, you say, I want to use space, it goes to facilities, and they say, your category, denial is the wrong word. We say, okay, your category 3, these are the fees. It's not that we say no.
Because I'm sort of just responding to like reports from within the community of refusals and from organizations that I was surprised to hear were refused.
If I know what you're talking about, I've asked for context, because I don't know what that's about. I've been here 9 years and I've heard that before. So-
Okay.
And nobody in my office, including facilities, is, what? So we've asked for clarification on what you're referring to us. Rumors start that aren't true. So-
Okay, so there isn't sort of, so I'm sort of like, without wanting to make a big kerfuffle out of something that may not be a kerfuffle, but wanting to also understand, like, do we refuse people and on what grounds?
But couldn't you also refuse people because A, the district is using the space for their own
Correct.
activities? Like,
That does
happen.
we have dibs on the
But
space.
so that would be
but
grounds.
Also,
Do we have other, but do we have
but
others?
also maybe you don't have a custodian available and they need a custodian
Right.
for the.
So-
It is
Maybe
possible.
Is there a mechanism if, let's say, someone wanted it for what we might consider a questionable use? I guess that may.
Yeah, I think I'm sort of just wondering, I'm less wondering about like, when there are like totally reasonable, understandable reasons, like, I'm not, like, yeah, you just say, this is our reasonable, understandable reason, but I'm more wondering about like, do we have any kind of a formal mechanism or any kind of a formal decision-making process around anything that doesn't fall into like, we're doing stuff with it on that day? Or
I
is
see
it
what
just?
you're talking about, like avoiding discriminatory practices.
Yeah.
The KF is not in use, so KFR is the backup policy to KF, and I believe KF addresses that. So we reserve the right to refuse someone for, you gotta be careful. You could throw out an organization that everybody would say no, but I'm not sure it's under civil liberties you could actually say no. But Yes, there's a mechanism. Somebody, I mean, I've been here 9 years, and thankfully, there's been no controversy about, I want to do something untoward and use your space. It's been, we're using the space, we can't find a custodian, or you have to pay, I don't want to pay. Those have been all the examples over the last 10 years.
That sounds like very
But,
legitimate.
but I think that there are, the perception of some, by some in the community, is that our spaces aren't really accessible to people within Lebanon as easily as our policy states.
Yeah,
I think that's sort of what and I'm wondering if like, if there, I mean, I'm not trying to say that like, just because rumors exist, it doesn't mean that like they're true, but to the extent that that perception maybe exists, do we maybe want to make it not exist as much?
So this has been a new thing, and Dana has presented, and we can present again. I mean, COVID messes things up. Nobody did anything for a year and a half. But we're actually quite proud of the opening up, if you will, of our spaces to people, and we have evidence from the last 8 years, you know, probably take out 2020, 21 out of it, of how open our stuff is. So I mean, I've heard that rumor before, and it's not fair, and we can prove based on who uses our space. It is very, yes, the rumor I've heard is, you know, the SAU was not open to anybody. That is, I mean, it's not true. I'm actually kind of frustrated when I hear that, because I live there and I know what organizations are in there, you know? So we can provide data that's older now, because even this year in our revenue, we're not getting the revenue we used to get that shows our space is being used, especially with the town. The city uses our stuff all the time.
Well, and I think you did that when we were discussing with the city about buying the building and all the different things we would need. We had a detailed grid of all the different uses that were happening over the years in the tally, and there was the drop off during the COVID years. So I think that we have proven that.
Right, I think you're right, that's the context, right?
Does that answer your question?
She's asking
Sort
if
of.
there is a mechanism.
I think I'm just,
Unless you're controversial and there's some sort of question whether it looks good in that district or should be legal to do, we're going to say yes if we can, subject to the fees.
thank you.
MJ?
Just moving on, I just have one question about the fees. The whole point, I think, that started this was to have some uniform fees across the thing, and I'm wondering why the multi-purpose room and the SAU gym are still cheaper than the other gyms. To me, I thought all gyms were created equal, especially now the nice brand spanking new multi-purpose room gym.
It's got two beams, though. It makes it less desirable,
I
because you'll run into
this
them.
these two beams, I just have this fantastic vision in my mind. We should charge a premium for it.
I see $328 for full day for category 2, for all gyms except for Mount Lab, which is not a gym.
But it is a gym now.
It's not.
It's not a gym. 584, 584. You're right, we can make the SAU gym 584, that's a mistake.
And then while you're doing that, under category 3, the gym for Hanover Street is 73, and the gym for SAU is 63.
Is this not the updated one?
I mean, I don't know. It's partially updated compared to the last one. So yes, but it's not done.
I feel like we just need to refer to that.
73, 73,
So Lil,
73.
the question,
You're right.
I don't think that we've addressed your question. So like, is this a further board discussion about like, do we feel like this provides the access that we're wanting?
So I think that for me, it's hard for me to answer that question, or to feel like we can even have an answer to that question until this KFR gets into especially category 1, gets into a state that we can actually talk about it. Because I think right now we're missing pieces. There's whole sentences that have to be in here that we don't have in here that say things that we need to include in this. So I feel like it's hard to address that unless everybody has the same text and is like, okay, now that we look at this, is this the philosophy we want to put out? Is this in keeping with what we think we're doing, providing services? Is that what we want to do? I don't know if we're at the point of deciding.
So then we have to send it back to policy.
Well, I think what was hard with policy getting it is that finance and facilities had taken the first go at it, and then Tim and Steve made the modifications and policy got it, and we're just like,
Yeah.
okay, and moved it. Do you know, like, so I'm not sure that we were looking at it.
So it's not a policy issue, is what you're saying? You're saying that it's more of a, I don't know, business?
Mayor-
I think you just add, this category includes Lebanon School District and Lebanon-based activities.
I mean, we can, I think, but then that goes back to still the question of admission fees or not, right? Because Lebanon-based, whether they're Lebanon-based or not, if they're Lebanon-based and they do fees, but we've distinguished now certain kinds of fees, certain kinds of fees.
Can't you say?
So
maybe
do you-
Lebanon School district.
We can say a lot of.
Activities are exempt from.
It needs a lot of
Do you-
wordsmithing is my point.
Do you want to send it back to finance and facilities so we can have this work kind of discussion? But we need to have some sense, I think finance and facilities or policy, whichever one you want to send it back to, needs to have some sense of what the board's general philosophy is around.
I mean, I feel like we've had a pretty, I mean, as a member of finance and facilities, I at least feel like I kind of understand the general philosophy. I mean, it's not like
What we're trying to get at, and then.
Yeah, I think we understand what we're trying to get at. It sounds like it needs to be cleaned up and sort of like the inconsistencies or the sort of like issues drawn out and corrected. But I don't feel like again, I don't think the philosophy is like a, Socrates
Right.
level philosophy here. I feel like it's just sort of like, here's the things that are important. They have some tension, but like, hey, sometimes we charge money, sometimes we don't. Like that feels fairly straightforward to me. So I guess I feel fine with just saying we're looking to tidy up what we have.
Yep.
Yeah, so
If others feel comfortable with that.
I mean, I'm comfortable with that. I would add one thing, is if finance facilities is okay with this, I'm willing to, take all of these things that we've said.
You mean you want to do the work for us,
I
Flo?
know. Yes, this part, just to clean this up so that we don't have to keep bringing it back with the language.
Well, I think that if you do the first round
Yeah, like a
based
round and
on
give it to finance
this,
facilities.
then we can look at it, or policy
Should
can.
we, should we not get in the way of Lil doing our work for us for a while?
And we would like to look at it after you make those changes to see if it's actually
Yeah.
There you go.
Yes.
Yeah, that
Doable.
sounds
Yes,
like-
right,
yes.
exactly, obviously,
Yes.
we have to, it's gonna have to go through several more.
It is the
Iteration.
kind of, because the same thing happened when we looked at it back in 2006. I mean, it takes forever to work with this policy because all these kinds of questions keep surfacing.
In an ideal world, my huge goal would be for it not to take a long time every time, right? That we get to the point where we agree that we're not having so many use case exceptions, that because we just have said it in such a way that it's very clear, and whenever anyone comes in who's got a new situation, we can look at our policy and say, oh, you clearly fall under 1, 2, or 3, right, the end. And I think we're not quite to that point.
To be clear, I'm not saying this is, obviously this is not worded the way you guys want it to, or is not clear enough. I have no problem with the policy not changing, because I feel it is clear. Like, I know if you're 1 or 2 or 3. So the other thing I do want to say is, on
And
bullet number
are you
2,
the
what I
one
was,
who makes the choices?
what's that?
Are you the one who makes the choices?
If they can't
when-
figure it out in facilities, they come to me and say which
Ah.
level, and that only happens rarely.
Got it.
Bullet 2, I just want to say, bullet 2 under category 1, what I was trying to say is, do not generate revenue or fees from a direct use in a district. What I mean is, whatever membership fee you pay to belong to your organization, we don't care about. That's why a fee to join Lightning Soccer is irrelevant, because that's not a fee from using our facilities. So that's what I was trying to get at.
No, 2 is the best bullet.
Okay, good.
For
I
real.
get it. I really get it.
2 is the most clear, so, good job.
I think, to be honest with you, from my perspective, you as the arbiter, if you would, of how this gets implemented, it makes perfect sense. And you know how you have been doing it, it makes perfect sense. But what I would like to see is
Does it make sense to you?
someone from the public who wants to come and use the facility, they can read the same language and come to the same conclusion that you're gonna come to.
Right, that's what
It needs to be locked in the mind of Tim. So
No.
you'll never know.
Yes, I mean, I want to second what Steve says. I think that's my thing. I want us to make sure that this, whether Tim is here or not, or whether Steve is here or not, that it's very clear for anybody who comes in, that they can
We
apply
need
this.
a digital survey that says, are you this or that? And then
Right.
you get the next question, are you this or
Yeah.
that?
I feel like-
And you get the next
I don't know,
question.
guys, I feel like we should be doing a lot more. We should be doing a lot more, like making this difficult.
So-
All right,
Spits it out.
Lisa has a question.
Well, I was just wondering if at the beginning of the policy, if you stated your philosophy, then we would all know that it's, you
No.
have a whole thing.
We
that
share the
that
same-
You helped us to understand over the course of this conversation, and now I understand why lightning soccer doesn't have
Well,
to
we,
pay.
we share the same, obviously, all of us want to have procedures that are outside of the person, so I get that, so. Just so
I think
you
we
know,
should go
like,
back- So I think you should, maybe if you wanted to
Yeah.
wordsmith some,
Yeah,
and then we
and
go
then
to
bring it
finance
back
and
to
facilities and
Or
review
you
it.
give it to Tim after you
Well, we're
do it, you give
tabling,
it to
okay, so
Tim.
first thing,
So do you need a motion to table that? Send
yes,
it
we
back
need a motion to
finance?
table the approval of KFR.
So, I'd move that we table policy,
The
or
approval.
approval of policy what is it?
KFR.
KFR, and send it back for further review at finance and facilities.
I'll second it.
Okay, so moved by Steve, seconded by Mary. Good. Then, do we need to do anything else? I mean, besides like work on it and give it back to finance and facilities?
So I think the only question is, finance and facilities is not scheduled to, so, but I think we could
I think it's
meet in
fine.
June.
That's easy to
yeah.
correct.
we have a policy in place, we're going to keep following it, and, it's,
Okay.
Yeah, and it's not urgent in the sense that this is not happening, these are not happening frequently.
Nobody
but
gets
they're-
to use anything until
Right.
we've done it.
Okay. All right, so yes, we need to vote on the motion to table, correct?
Yes.
Okay, all those in favor of tabling this and moving back to finance? Okay, thank you. Unanimous, thank you. Thank you, I appreciate that. I know that was long and arduous. Okay, so really, we have these three pieces of new business, which are not long. So do we want to take a break now, or do we want to push through and just finish these to the end of the agenda? Yes, okay, we're going to push through. Okay. Yes?
Can I ask one question?
Yes.
I know that at the last meeting, we had talked about the fact that the Finance and Facilities Committee had recommended the creation of a working group on the preschool or the early childhood education question, and that we had said that that was going to be in new business, and I'm not familiar with how that kind of thing actually gets added to the agenda, because it's not on this one, so I just wasn't sure if that's the
So we said that we were going to,
prerogative.
did we say, I think we said we were going to have that be, the idea of a working group be discussed in finance and facilities. Is that?
We,
No,
finance and
the Finance and
facilities
Facilities
discussed it.
voted to recommend to the board that we create a working group.
So in the last meeting, that you just, that
In-
last finance and facilities meeting?
The previous meeting before this last one.
Ah,
That was April 3rd, because I wrote that down, I had a question about that.
okay.
So,
That.
and it wasn't discussed at the last meeting, and I just don't see it here.
Yeah, no, you're right, that's a good call. All right, so, yeah, we can do it today under other business. That's pretty straightforward.
So then maybe we should take a break.
And then I was gonna say, maybe we do need a
Yes,
break.
so maybe we'll take a break. Okay, we're gonna take a 5-minute break. Thank you. All right, so we're moving on to 10A, new business, discussion and action, substitute rate.
So can I just ask for one clarification?
Yes.
Are we really, is it the para substitute rate that we're adjusting? We're not adjusting all super substitute rates?
We're asking we want to adjust them both to $125 a day.
Okay, so regardless if it's for a teacher or,
They were together for years, and then during COVID, to try to get more teacher subs, we raised the teacher rate.
okay,
And that is, and then with the addition of the $4 an hour for an support staff contract, it's really dried up the market for para subs. And we're too low compared to some of our neighbors.
so just a one substitute rate is what we're
Right.
going for?
Correct.
And it's not an hourly rate, it's a per
Well,
day?
it is by law, it has to be paid out hourly, but it'd be $125 a day, and that, breaks down on the time card, it goes hour by hour. So if you're here half a day, it's half of 125, whatever that is. 68. So it has to be billed, it's an hourly position, it's not a salary position, it's by law, so.
Okay,
So we tell people 125 a day, but it's, you get paid by the hour.
and so, and they always work the same number of hours?
If you're, well, no, I mean, if you put in, so our absence management system goes on what you put in. So if you want 4 hours off, it'll find a sub for 4 hours, and the 4 hours you get paid matches the 4 hours vacation, it matches.
So what is the normal length of our day?
For
7.
teachers, it's 7 hours. I mean, for teachers, it's 7.5 hours. For pairs, it's 7.
So the pairs are making more than the teachers?
In this scenario, per hour, yes.
In an hourly rate, they work fewer hours, so the total is the same.
Right.
So why don't we approve an hourly rate?
I mean, you can do that, but again, there is a bit of incentive this way to pay, to work as a para, but we're not getting para work. So
You said a para 7 hours, and a teacher
on
7.5?
an hourly basis on this, you would make more as a para. But I don't think that's a bad thing, because our teacher subs are being filled either by subs coming in or by support staff taking that for $4 an hour. So this is a bit of incentive for people to sub as a para. Where now there's the opposite. Now you get paid less per hour to sub as a para. And you thought you were going to be a teacher, but you come in and we make you a para. So you're like, never mind, I'm not working for Lebanon.
Also disincentivize pairs, because you're saying now pairs will step up and be the teacher for the day, is that
Right.
right? So it would disincentivize them from doing that, is that true?
I don't think it does that, because they're going to get a minimum $20.41 an hour, $20.91 an hour. The lowest pay we have for a para now is $16.91 starting July 1.
So they get more than $21.25 a day if they take that bump?
Correct.
So
It
if
doesn't
you are
disincentivize-
saying you want to make it all across the board, then they actually get a decreasement of their...
No. It
just
has
for
nothing to do with the para
substitutes.
contract.
Okay.
I'm saying it doesn't hurt paras, because they can still take the teacher job and make more per hour. And the person that's coming in behind them is not
So
going to make
if
that.
if a para who is working for the district takes the bump, then they get $140 for the day.
They get their rate plus $4 an hour. And the lowest rate is $16.91.
So if they were being paid $16.91 and they get the bump, then they make $140 for the day. But they're already employed by the district.
Right.
So we're giving the incentive to the people who already are employed by the district and keeping the people who are out of the district, they still all have the incentive to come and be either a para or a teacher. So that's
you.
what it comes, because what they're finding is that the para position is the troublesome one once these people in the district are taking the position, the teaching position.
That's what I'm
Okay,
trying to say.
I don't understand, though, why we wouldn't say our para rate is $17.86, a full day is 7 hours, which equates to $125 for the day. Like,
I mean, that's essentially what we're doing. I mean, we're just talking about marketing. People, what am I going to get if I sub for the day?
It's
$125.
better to say $125 for the day than $17.85, because you can make $18 at McDonald's right now. So $125 for the day.
Sounds like you're getting more.
Yeah, and if you are trying to count up how much you could make, like when I'm trying to sell parking positions, I try and do it for the whole weekend. Like, you could make this much if
I mean,
you work the whole weekend.
You're talking about how we market it, and that's fair, but I think for ease of discussion and for talking to other people, $125 a day is what you get. But it's on the time card, but it's gonna say I work 7 hours or $17.86. Yeah,
And if you're a teacher, it's 7.5 hours at $16.67.
right.
Yeah, you make less money as a teacher than you would as a parent.
Make the same amount of money, you just make less per hour, but you're making the same amount of money. Everybody's making $125.
If someone says I don't wanna be a
Right,
teacher,
but
if
if-
someone says I don't wanna be a teacher, I wanna make $17.86 an hour, say, great, we need pairs. The teachers are filled with the support staff, for the most part.
Okay,
Do we need a motion to approve?
yeah, and it's discussion and action, so we do need a motion. So can we get a motion to approve the substitute rate increase?
I'll move that we accept the proposed increase in substitute rates to $125 per day.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All right, moved by Steve, seconded by Mary. Any other discussion?
I just have a question, so what is the current rate? Because I know we did raise it.
Right now, we're paying 105, on day rates, we're paying 105 for teachers and 84 for paras.
Okay.
So way under budget. And we don't want to start it early. We don't
I
need
talked to
to-
Diane right before this meeting, and I think we're good starting at July 1, especially with the new para rates from the new contract. I think it makes it neater.
Good. Okay.
You ready? Okay. All those in favor of accepting the motion to approve the substitute rate increase to $125 per day? All right, 9-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask one more question? Just out of curiosity, for long-term subs, though, do they get a rate, or do they
Huh?
get paid this rate?
Long-term subs, we have, believe it or not, we are following a policy that was written down back in Gail Plutie's days. We pay you step one of the track that you're eligible for. So if you're a long-term sub and you have a master's degree, we pay you master's step one. And that seems to have worked really well. So
Okay.
Okay. All right, moving on to B, discussion and action, accept the donation of $20,000 from the Byrne Foundation for the LHS Science Olympiads dues and fees. Stephen?
I move that we graciously accept the $20,000 donation from the Byrne Foundation for the LHS Science Olympiad dues and fees.
And Mary seconds. Okay, thank you. Moved by Steve, second by Mary. Again, we thank them for their generous donation. All those in favor? Okay, 9-0, unanimous. Thank you very much. All right, next, discussion and action, approve the donation of $4,085.96 from the Zalay family for the HSS library.
Wow.
Can I ask a quick question?
Let's get the motion first. And then we'll-
Well, so, but my question is,
Okay.
why did we have to have a public hearing for the 20,000 and not for the 4,000?
because it's over a $5,000 limit.
Okay.
All right.
I will make a motion to approve the donation of $4,085.96 from the Solis family for the Hannah Street School Library.
Second.
Okay, motion by MJ. Oh, you're both. Do you want a second? Oh, second by Steve. Okay. Everyone can get it. All right. Do we have any more information about this?
It's a very specific amount, so
It
there
is
must
a
be
very
something in
specific amount.
particular.
I don't know why it's just a specific amount. Obviously, it's not random. The note that she attached to Katrina Hill encloses a check for $4,085.96 for the purchase of books for the Hanover Street School Library. Sincerely, Robert and Mary Zalay. So I don't know if they had a conversation about what books she might feel useful to buy. But
Yeah.
That's great.
Was this in addition to, like, the amount that we have budgeted for
Right.
books and stuff like that?
This is a donation. It'll go into the special revenue fund earmarked for the Hanover Street Library, and that's all it can be used for.
I understood all of that.
The regular library funding is in a general fund.
I just have one question about the books themselves. Do you have any titles? Like, is there any example of the titles that were purchased?
You would have to, well, it's not been purchased yet because they can't spend it until you approve it. But I would have to have Jack or Katrina present to you what they're going to buy. I don't know. After the purchase order's done, I could probably bring it into you, but I don't know.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I would love to see it.
All right, any other comments on this, questions? No? Okay. The motion is to approve the donation of $4,085.96 from the Zalay family for the National Street Library. All those in favor? Okay, unanimous, 9-0. Excellent. All right, which moves us to committee updates. Finance and facilities.
Okay, Finance and Facilities met last Thursday, I believe it was. We had a presentation from the Lebanon Tree Advisory Board, and they were telling us about the master plan that they're undertaking in the entire city of Lebanon to address areas of high heat due to areas with large amounts of pavement and a lack of trees. And they said the Lebanon High School parking lot is one of their high heat index areas in the city. They're in the process right now of applying for grants from the U.S. Forest Service, and then they want to partner with the Department of Works and like Parks and Recreation, and then the school to plant some trees. We explained about the construction project, and this actually came about as part of the recommendation when we presented our project to the planning board. And then we explained that right now the parking lot has a lot of drainage issues, and it needs to have some site work of its own that was actually cut from the renovation budget due to not having enough funds to do the building and the parking lot to get the bond to pass. So we agreed that we would keep in touch and explore in the future partnering with them after they see what grant funds they have and we decide what direction we're going in with our parking lots. And then the other part of the meeting was we went over the end of year fund list, which Tim has a handout for us tonight. There was about $800,000 that we may potentially have for end of year funds. And they have come up with a list and ranked it of top priorities. And we will be voting on this end of year fund list at our next board meeting. I don't know, Tim, if you want to add any.
Well, I'll just orient you real quickly. So there was some discussion about whether we want to change our process and what happens next year, and that's certainly within the board's purview. But for this, we followed the process we've been doing for the last several years. The list on the front page, end of year project list, are ideas we have, things we're requesting to do with money that we still have remaining from our fund balance. I think on the back is a summary as of mid-April of what it would look like. We think we can do these lists and still have about $1.5 million. A lot of that includes, or some of that includes revenue. We can talk about that later, extra revenue we can't spend. So if you approve this list or any part of this list, I would do purchase orders, reserve that money. So when I report to the state, I report how much money we have left minus this amount. So that's how that works.
And I think it's important to point out that most of the things on this list are things that Finance and Facilities has either talked about throughout the year, particularly with the boiler replacement plans. We've spent a lot of time on that and talking to different contractors. And then also the other parts are things that were actually discussed in length during the budget deliberative session back in November, and then ultimately ended up being trimmed out of the budget. So there's definitely been a lot of discussion, maybe for the new members, on a lot of these topics, and are probably in some meeting minutes.
I think the thing that are we just having a good conversation about this right now? Yeah. I think the thing that I really appreciated about and the reason that this list is being brought forward to the school board now when we're not actually voting on it, we're kind of just updating on it, was the fact that it's giving folks a little bit more time to kind of process what's in there, and I really appreciate that the team put it together when they did, and that we have a little bit of time to kind of absorb this. So thank you for bringing it forward.
I would say if you have any questions over the next couple of weeks besides something that I can answer in the moment, which is probably most anything, but you can, send a little email and she'll send it on. But like what is a snow removal system? I can describe that, but I'm not going to spend that time now. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to let you know. So.
I think maybe just to help the newer members, maybe just talked about number one a little bit, and
Sure.
how we were basically draining the capital reserve fund to pay for the Lebanon track, and also that because our fundraising efforts fell short, we actually were taking more money out of the capital reserve than we had originally anticipated. So.
Right, so for most of these are actual purchase orders that we will cut either to a vendor or to Lebanon School District shortly till we get a vendor. So we actually cut our purchase order. The first one is a little bit unique in that we have the opportunity, the board approved up to $1.1 million for the track. Thought we were going to get, the target for fundraising was $300,000. I think it was around, well, you approved the public hearing. Yeah. So with funds that are left from unexpended funds, which is another conversation, why they're there, and I always do present to the board the major categories as to why. We have the opportunity to take less money out of the cap reserve than required. So essentially, you'd be paying for half the track out of the general fund money that's there, and half the track, or a little more than half the track out of the cap reserve, and it keeps the cap reserve. The cap reserve has been spoken for between Mount Leb and the track, and if we take everything out of the track, everything that that you guys have authorized to come out of the cap reserve, you basically have no money left in the cap reserve. So this is a way to leave some money in there. I think if you can do it, it's a good thing to do. That's what's proposed.
Right, and the other part of that is the capital reserve fund can only be funded by what we get approved by the voters on any given year. So the voters have approved that $600,000 will go back into the capital reserve fund, but the only way we could otherwise go about getting the extra $400,000 was if we'd asked the voters to approve to get $1 million in the capital reserve fund this year. So it's kind of a one-time exception that we can actually take advantage of to put ourselves in a better position for basically our emergency rainy day fund.
Right, and I think it's important, as you described, we're not really putting anything into the capital reserve. What we're doing is using general funds as a way to withdraw less from the capital
Correct.
reserve.
Correct.
And so after all is said and done, will our capital reserve fund going into next, or at the start of next year, will be back up to about $1 million.
Approximately.
Which is around the amount that Tim is much more comfortable.
I don't really want to get any lower than that. I'd love to have $5-6 million in there, but.
I also think that it's worth we also spent a lot of time talking about philosophies around capital reserve fund. There's two ways to get money into a capital reserve fund. At the end of the year, to put money into it, which requires a voter approval, or have it as a line item in our budgeting process, which of course also requires voter approval because they approve the budget, but have it be a line item so that we, on a regular basis, not from extra funds at the end of the year, but as part of our budgeting plan to contribute to our capital reserve on an ongoing basis.
Has that ever been done?
It used to be.
Not since before me. I don't know if it happened before Jim Fenn, but when I came here from Jim Fenn, we were doing it the same way we do it now. Which makes one level makes a lot of sense. It doesn't increase the taxes, but I like the philosophy behind we're dedicated to this and we're doing this come hell or high water.
And I think I like that too, because we know from having cut all of these things from the HSS project that we are going to need to address them, right? And if we don't ever have a fund and we're just always waiting for end of year, then we don't ever know how is it that we're going to address those things. But we want to address them all, and we know that they're not enormous. They are sizable, but they're not huge. there's something that we could take care of if we've gotten a fund to help us with that.
On top of that, you're right, I agree with you. On top of that, though, Finance and Facilities has also spent time reviewing major things that are going to need to be covered, like roof replacements, which are on the order of millions of dollars. And so unless we start putting away money for that in small aliquots every year, eventually we're going to be stuck with a big problem without the money to pay for it.
Yeah.
So the other part of the conversation that we were having at Finance and Facilities is in knowing that there are a bunch of things at Hanover Street School that didn't get approved or are part of this project. We had talked about, and Tim, I don't remember if we as the board need to task you with costing out those other pieces of the, or requesting that those other pieces be costed out on some sort of prioritized, in some sort of prioritized way, so that we can think of, I mean, we won't think about them in the context of the end of year discussion, but just so that we have those as we move into next year, budget and blah, blah, blah.
I mean, you can formally task me if you want. I tell you, I talked to them already after F&F just on Tuesday, and I presented, I found the list, and I dug it out, and we kind of verbally developed a plan to present a priority and get some modern numbers to present, you know, during the fall. So Paul verified what I was saying, is that, you know, those numbers were a snapshot in the moment, and we have to relook at what you want to do and how much it would cost.
So I think that's great. I think that's good. I'm glad that we're going to do that. I think that prioritized list cannot be decided by Paul or even Echo.
Correct.
I think it has to be decided, no, but even by us, I think it needs to be decided by Hanover Street.
Which is what we talked about.
So yeah, so we
Right.
just make sure that Hanover Street is helping us make that
No, I
priority
agree.
list. I think, because that was the thing we didn't know before, is what did they want? It's easy
Yeah.
for us to say, do this and this, but I'd like to know what they want.
Is this, like that conversation that took place and this sort of that's also taking place, are these the kinds of things that a clerk of the works would potentially help facilitate?
Yeah, I'd say yes.
Okay. I think just, I was really struck in multiple conversations that have taken place now about like it, I didn't understand how the SAU was overseeing the construction work, and I think that like now understanding a little bit more about it, it feels like it's wonderful that we've had like a team that I'm sure is very conscientious and also has a lot of other things to do and doesn't necessarily have the time to be doing daily checks and have the construction background. I think I am really struck by the fact that if that's a recommendation and knowing that that's a thing, I feel like that would be a good thing to have. So just to bring that back around. And I wonder, I was sort of wondering if that might come out of some of this money or some of the, something.
I don't, the problem is you need to have, for audit's sake and for just for accounting's sake, you got to have a real target, and I feel like if I put that on, there'd be a shot in the dark, and I wouldn't know who to encumber it to in time to really make, we're going to have to figure out a different way to fund it, I guess is what I'm saying, because I wouldn't feel comfortable putting it on this list.
Okay.
So the only real opportunity that we would have is to increase the amount that, the relief amount to the capital reserve. So at least we're holding that money in the capital reserve.
Well, I don't, yeah,
No, but for projects. I mean, were you asking about the cost for that person?
the cost of a person probably cannot be cap reserved. I feel like I've asked that question before, and the answer is no.
Can the cost of a person overseeing the construction project be funded by,
The interest?
for example, interest on a bond for that
Yes.
project?
Correct.
Great.
Well, that's good.
But,
Yes.
right, it's right. So, I mean, so then the question would be, like, we could increase, anyway, we can play with this stuff however we want next time.
Okay, so if you have any additional questions about this, if they come to you as you look at it, email them to me and I'll get them to Tim, and he'll have answers ready either before the next meeting or at the next meeting for you all. Okay?
And I think for any of the new board members that just, you can either let me know if you, just based on wanting to understand like end of year funds and any further clarifications just on what it is that we're looking at and deciding.
So even, I mean, on this, you know, if you don't know what CRF is, this whole conversation is like really confusing, right?
We had an
So-
extensive
Right.
conversation
Right,
about
so
CRF.
capital relief fund, right. So there's a lot of acronyms that we use that I'd like us to use less of them because every time we come in, we have to explain them all over again, which is
Tim,
fine.
can we go over the food service fund again, please? Because I didn't feel like we spent enough time on that the other day.
I'm learning your sarcasm.
He's like, no.
So
Okay.
that's the fun we pay for
All
food.
right, moving on. Policy Committee, next meeting is Monday, September 11th at 8:30 at the SAU office. Education Committee, next meeting is Monday, May 15th at 4:15 at the SAU office. PNN is still TBD. Student SWAC, you met May 3rd. How did that go?
Well, that was the one that I was asking the questions about. Well, so we have new people that are coming from each of the buildings now, and it looks like PE and health is the grouping of people. And my question was, is there a reason why mental health would not be under this umbrella of concern having to do with this committee? And what I learned was that it has to do under student services. So what SWAC does primarily is oversee the lunch programs and compliance with nutrition and wellness in regards to those things, physical activity and food and nutrition. So that was just clarifying for me, and I understood it better. And then we also talked about the utility in the people who are showing up there to be ambassadors for the free and reduced lunch applications, to try and reiterate among all of their constituency why those applications are so crucial to the gaining of different kinds of dollars that we might not get if we do not have those applications. So that's something that we talked about, and then we're working on goals for next year. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. And your next meeting is in fall 2023 at 3:30 p.m. sometime in the fall. All right.
It's all fall long.
All fall. All right. HACTC, you met on Tuesday, May 9th.
We did. It was interesting. They had at the end of the meeting, because it's the end of the year, kids from different school districts meet with their superintendents and board members, and they went over their projects. And the lady that I saw in the high school, she had actually switched over her major there in her junior year. And so she's going away to college at Binghamton, New York University. But what was interesting is we talked to her about her experience at the center, but also how difficult was it during COVID. And her experience, and she said actually it was very nice. I got back into seeing kids because she was home for a whole year without any friends or anything around. And she said it was so much easier because there were people that had the same likenesses and interests. The other thing was that we asked, well, is there another way we could improve it from Lebanon High School to the center? And she said yes, to improve the communication. And that was mainly because the advisory group from the center and the one from Lebanon they're not together. And so they're on a bus or coming back, and they miss their advisory from one place or the other.
Oh, no.
So that was made note to Joanne was going to leave a note. The other thing was, they're going to up their cosmetology. They're going to offer a year, so being there for a whole year every day, the full day, which would mean they would up the tuition. They're just kind of working on it now. And the reason they're doing that is because the hair design place in West Lab is going out of business. So they're trying to get more people in staff. So that's kind of in a flux. The other thing that was really cool is they held a reverse meeting where they had students that put together their resumes, and they did their cover letters. And they sat down with businesses around the table, and they could sit wherever they wanted to and get an interview.
Oh, wow.
And they actually hired so far, I think there were 6 students that were hired right on the spot. So that was very cool. And they were very excited about that. Actually, that was one of the things I suggested back a year ago. So that was kind of cool to see it in action. The man who developed the whole process is new to the Trade Center. And he said it took a lot of time, a lot of effort, but the kids are all excited and want to do it more. So that was...
So Mary, I have a question about
Yeah.
that. As a business, how would you become part of that process?
As a business?
Yeah, like if you wanted to be at the table with the kids to interview, how would you gain access to that?
Yeah, you could, I think you approach
Okay.
Erica. That would be probably the first step. So they're doing a lot to promote, because their attendance was down a bit, and now it's getting larger. In fact, they just started an adult ed program, and they had 100 students.
Oh, wow.
First trip around. And they did 2 sessions for LNA, so they're just starting to fill the needs, which is very cool. The other thing is that they received the first auto grant for the state of Vermont for putting together electric cars and working on that, which is very cool.
Really cool.
So there was a lot going on.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And your next meeting is also in fall at 9 a.m. sometime. All right. Area committee meets next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Schools District City Task Force meets next Thursday, May 25th at 6, not next Thursday, May 25th at 6 p.m. Future agenda items, board member recommendations or questions? Anything? We're going to talk about under other business. We're going to talk about Jessica's question. Anything else? Okay. And
I don't have a question. I just wanted to say that the new board members went on our tour, and we finished our time at the SAU building with the SAU leadership team. It was very insightful. It was time well spent, I think we all felt. And we, again, express our appreciation and gratitude to the administrators who took the time with us.
great, here. Thank you. All right, our next school board meeting is Wednesday, May 24th at 6:30 p.m., but we are going to, no, not just kidding. That's it. It is next week at 6:30 p.m. I was thinking of a different meeting. Our school board retreat is Wednesday, June 14th at 6:30 p.m. And our other business. So this is the question that Jessica had, which was earlier, Finance and Facilities had discussed or recommended that we form an exploratory committee to examine, what exactly? Tell me the wording of the...
It was sort of just to examine early childhood education, sort of the discussion was around the various topics that have come up and that we talked about in the meeting, our last few meetings in various ways, and the fact that the sort of facility needs, the teacher needs, the financing, the fact that the city is doing stuff, the fact that early childhood education is a complex topic, all kind of came up, and it felt like it was very hard to have that conversation in a siloed way within one committee. And so, we recommended that the board we recommended that the board form a working group or a task force or whatever you want to call it, to start convening conversations about that in a way that would be able to move forward a little bit more than an individual committee would be able to.
Okay. So what are your thoughts?
So I think one of the questions that we had is just identifying sort of from a ready, like what are we seeing, what I remember our conversation being, in our pre-K or kindergarten classrooms, are we seeing a lack of readiness that may demonstrate a need in sort of the Lebanon community for some different kind of early education program. So one way to maybe start the conversation is to get a sense of that. And the question is, would that be like an EC kind of play? Do you know?
I think there's that. I think there's also, though, the questions around, like, you know, we had a great conversation at our last meeting with Sean about the program that's sort of being built currently, and also with Katie Roach and Elizabeth Bailey, who are running the preschool, the sort of existing preschool program. But I think the questions that I had and still have sort of revolve around, okay, we've done things a certain way for a while, but what do we think needs to happen going forward? Do we think that some of those things are ripe for change? How well are those programs meeting, like they are meeting requirements? To what extent do we feel that they could be meeting needs and desires of students and families in Lebanon better? Not to impugn the program, but simply to say like, hey, you know, they're doing a lot with what they have, but do we as a school board feel like that's what we want to continue doing? I think sort of looking at it a little more holistically in terms of, we know a lot more about early childhood education and sort of early childhood education needs in our community, but we also know more about it now than we did 20 years ago and how important it is. We have a lot more data than we did 20 years ago. And so I think sort of seems like a moment when the city's gonna do some stuff, there's a need within the community. It feels like a relevant moment for the school board to be involved in conversations at a community level.
Sorry, does that, I think that's true. I think I have two points. One, I think that unless we know, I would like to get some Lebanon specific data, right? Like I think unless we know that we are seeing a lack or we know there's a lack as far as spaces go, but are we seeing a lack of kindergarten readiness that is not, well, could be partially attributed to COVID, but I guess I want to know like what are our teachers actually seeing, which is something that I think we could ascertain.
Yeah.
Like it's not hard to ascertain that, but I think we would have to ask to get that information.
I think there's a place to start for any of this would be to ask a lot of questions, to do some surveys potentially of parents in Lebanon, of young children in addition to teachers. I think we want to be a little bit, to me, we want to be a little bit careful to not just ask the people who are currently running our programs how our programs are going, but to also ask the parents of our sort of youngest students in Lebanon, like how they're feeling about the education offerings in our town or city, which I think is a different question, and I'm not sure we're going to get the answers to that by asking our current administrators how their programs are going. So I think to me, there's kind of a couple of different stakeholders in the conversation, and I personally have a background in doing survey work and sort of interpreting it, and so I would feel very comfortable sort of helping a group to work on that and trying to figure out whether there is a need, it may be that everybody is feeling great and there's no need and everything's fine. That could be an outcome. There also could be an outcome that's very different than that. I think we won't know until we sort of bother to ask. I think we do know that there's, so that's sort of where I would start from, but it feels like we need to have a way to have that conversation, and we don't really right now.
So yes, agree. I think the other thing I was going to say, which is, so there's two separate questions. We'll come back to that one because I think that's second question is, I do think that we, after having listened to Katie and after having listened to Sean, I think it's really important that we have district representation on that task force of the city's ECE program, right? And so like I would like to recommend that at least Katie is on it. But I think I mean, it might make sense also for you to be on the task force as a board rep, but as a sort of, so that we have multiple perspectives from the district on that task force. I don't want to volunteer you for extra.
Katie might not have bandwidth for it.
Well, that's what we have to talk to Katie about, but, I mean, someone has to be on it from the district of some kind, because we can't have this program happening around us without us being involved. So I think we have to, we can talk to Katie about whether it's her or not, but I think it could be Elizabeth, it could be multiple different people,
Right.
but.
I would be very willing to participate. I don't know that there is I don't really understand how it's structured at the city level in terms of the ECE, because I'm not sure it is a task force.
I mean, and
It's-
that may be something that we can ask when we meet with the city
Yes.
on
Yeah.
Thursday.
Yeah.
I mean, and to know what kind of task force they have, you know, do they have a task
How is it
force?
structured?
How are they?
Mary went to the presentation, do you know? more
There
about
are
it?
several different people, like, I
Yeah.
think there's 4 or 5 different people that are part of that whole development. One is the building and the site work, and one is the architect, and one is the educator piece, and then one is the program piece from the Girls and Boys Club. So they do all probably meet together, probably more so via
They're-
video, but
it's
there's
through-
different places in the state.
It's through Vital Communities, and they have a list of who's on the task force. There's a name of
Right.
Okay.
the group, so there is a group of who, and they do meet. Their meetings are on YouTube, so they are meeting, have met. I don't know how frequently they meet, but we can assess that.
And I guess I don't think that we as a board can direct Katie to be a part of this committee. It would have to be an initiative that we discuss with either our current superintendent, which is outgoing, or to wait until our new superintendent comes on board in the fall and discuss a plan of action so that she can decide who the appropriate person is to appoint to the committee.
Right.
I was just mentioning Katie because they had reached out to her before, but yes, that I agree. That's absolutely.
So I think at this point, the question is, what is the appetite of this board to sort of continue to pursue the conversation, I think is really what you're asking. And if we do have an appetite, then what is our plan?
I guess I don't, in my mind, and this may just be the way that I work, I don't know that this group of, 9 people at 9 o'clock at night is going to come up with a great plan for a very complex topic. It, to me, more feels like, do we have a willingness to create space for that conversation to take place under our auspices? And then let that group come up with the plan and bring it back to you and present it. Like, I think to me, that's how these things tend to work better, is not like, that would be my preference, or my recommendation would sort of be like, if you're willing to create the working group, or whatever you want to call it, and then let them come back to you with a proposed kind of course of action, a proposed plan, like for approval or something. But I'm less familiar with how this board functions.
Are you talking about the school district and its role in the school district's already program, or are you talking about the city one?
I think just,
I think we're talking about early childhood education in Lebanon.
Well,
And there are many things that come under that topic, which include both our current programs, which, we do have current early childhood education programs, and things that the city is doing that would be relevant to that topic. So I think it to me, I would be thinking about it as the topic at large, because it's very complex, and that's why a working group is warranted, is because it isn't simple enough to reduce to one aspect. That would be my thought. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. But the state of Vermont took how long for them to get their early childhood programs up and running? So are you talking, well, Lebanon should have one? I'm not sure what you're looking at.
I think
guess, like,
that
what's the
to me, that would be
goal?
what the working group would be tasked with kind of deciphering, is
That's
what.
the goal, then that's the goal. I get that, but I don't see that we can do that without having a new superintendent knowing what she wants to work on. That's important to her, especially her first year.
So I have a few thoughts about First of all, it feels to me like the working group inside of the board may not be the best placement for it right at this moment, just moving forward, in that what we probably need to be doing is making connections with the different elements of early childhood education, just as a citywide situation. So a really good placement for that request could live when we go to the city task force and ask for that to be something that's implemented as a citywide effort. That's one thing. The other thing is that having your voice from the board into that space could be very beneficial for the district and for the city. So I'm not saying that I don't think that we should do it, but it definitely feels like the placement for it is across some kind of citywide because I don't know if you know, but there's a lot of different providers of early childhood education in New Hampshire, and that is very anomalous to other places in the country. So getting a handle on what is accessible here and to whom, I think that's probably the biggest question, is who can afford early childhood education in Lebanon and who cannot, because that's really where we would go with that, because many people can access early childhood education and do every single year with their children. And what the school district is providing is a different thing, because New Hampshire doesn't have a required preschool. I mean, until very recently, we didn't even have a full day kindergarten. My kids went to a part-day kindergarten. So it feels like there's an evolution going on that you're talking about. We have lots and lots of new data. And so maybe what we can do from this end is we can intervene with the education committee, ask some questions to get data, get fully functioning with the things that the school board that are appropriately set out for us to know about, which is education and how we're doing it and whether or not we're doing a good job. And to me, it seems like the surveys would come through the city, because it feels a little bit uncomfortable to me that we would have an advocacious kind of thing happening through the board when it's a citywide probe that you're talking about. It's not just school district, because the school district does a very limited early childhood educational process right now, as required by the state. But what is happening besides that is important to articulate and important to know about, but also how this new project that we're getting on board might affect. Because from what I heard, he's not interested in having it be just a Lebanon concern. It's a Upper Valley, and it's been grant funded, and it's been generated by an Upper Valley impulse. So it feels to me like early childhood education just in Lebanon, it's a bigger question. And the people who are going to those early childhood education resources, you meet people from all over the Upper Valley when you send your child to, say, Hampshire Nursery School or Montessori School here in Lebanon, or the Montessori School in Hanover, or whatever is happening in Plainfield. Is that's it? You don't just, it's not just in the school district.
So I think Lisa's point is a good one about that it does feel like, as you're explaining it tonight, it feels like there are pieces of this that are definitely school board focused or education committee focused, there are also bigger pieces, and I agree, I think there's a big question, a conversation to be had, but some of those questions would need to happen probably through if it's a working group at all, if we did a working group that's a joint working group, like joint city, school board working group, which would be something we'd have to talk about at the joint city task force, or at city meeting. And then Mary's point is also a good one, I think we need to be careful not to create an initiative before we talk to our new superintendent, just because I don't think anyone's going to disagree that pursuing early childhood education and understanding the situation, as Lisa and you have both pointed out, the situation as it is now and whether it's meeting the needs of the largest group of people, I think that is absolutely something that we want to ascertain as a city, as a school district, in all those ways. My question is, do we want to, how is that happen, I think is your question, and then to what extent does the new superintendent want to prioritize that, and to what extent do we want to prioritize that? I think both of those things are not the same necessarily.
I think that all sounds very wise and sort of reasonable to me. I think that it sounds like maybe the next steps are to, I think the idea of sort of broaching this in the city school board task force meeting, and kind of maybe, I haven't been to one of those meetings before, so it'll be my first time kind of understanding how they operate and what it does and whatever else, and maybe kind of broaching the idea of some kind of a joint something at some point. I think that seems like a reasonable point, and then also talking, sort of tabling, a light table until the new superintendent is in place and we have a chance to have that conversation. I mean, those things are all going to happen at about the same time, in the next couple of months. So I feel like that's all a very reasonable thing. I would encourage the board to individually consider the concept of early childhood education, its importance to our community and our students, because I think I feel like it's an area that to me it feels a little bit like the way that dentistry isn't considered part of your health care. It's yes it is, but it's not, because of old sort of stuff that's kind of irrelevant to the fact that your teeth are important to your health. And I think that is a little bit the way that early childhood education is kind of lumped off in this way that is not really an accurate sort of reflection of the way that kids learn and the way that our community functions. And so I think that I feel very comfortable with the approach of wanting to talk to the city, wanting to talk to the new superintendent, but I also think that just because we haven't done something a certain way in this state or this town or this sort of school district in the past, to me shouldn't restrict us from thinking very seriously about philosophically how important we think it is, and philosophically how much support we think that it deserves within our community. So
Well, I know I participated with the city when they were having a conversation about the rec center and stuff like that, and there was a specific, the city manager, the council created this separate group to sort of explore, and it included a variety of people within the community and outside, people that might utilize that space. So I wonder if there would be any appetite for the city to sort of create a similar thing, in knowing that they're trying to create this facility, but sort of talk about sort of Lebanon-centric needs in addition to what the Vital Community thing is doing, so we can ask and participate in that way, if the city would be willing to set up that task force.
Well, because the city has a preschool through CCBA. I mean, technically speaking.
I don't think so, because the CCBA has nothing to do with the city.
UCAT's independent.
I've always thought that
No,
it was
it's a
part
separate.
of it.
But I also think, I agree. I think what you're saying, that makes sense, and I think that is really important to reframe this, to start to frame this and to think about this as a pre-K-12 continuum as opposed to a K-12 continuum, which I think we definitely do.
Yes.
I was thinking about this when you were talking about the last meeting, and I thought, I don't even know if I could I don't think we mentioned pre-K the letters pre-K during the entire budget season. Not that it's not included in the budget, it absolutely is, but it wasn't something that we talked about separately at all, and I think that's indicative of what you're saying, absolutely. I think one thing we can do is, since we have EC coming up this next week,
Yep.
and they're having kindergarten screenings right now, is we can talk to Karen about, can we get some data started right now, since they're doing the screenings and they're gonna have this fresh in their minds. Can we talk about what they're seeing, and get that started from our end of our individual teachers to start. And then I think the next week is the following week is the city task force. We talk about that and figure out what their actual task force for their ECE thing even is. So I think there's a lot of things we can do right now. But yes, I would hold off on anything beyond that until the new superintendent comes, and then.
And Jessica, just so you know, when we interviewed her, she was very much aware and wanting to do something for preschool. So I'm sure she's going to be willing to do things. But I think we want to see what her approach is, and she's going to be walking carefully too, but I think that's the way we're going to have to start. And I totally agree we need to go there. And I like the idea of collecting information, if we're allowed to do that, to see where we are with numbers of kids.
And
what their needs are.
I'd be really super curious if, what percentage of our kids come through our preschool program, what percentage of kids come from a daycare center in the Upper Valley, how many of our kids are homeschool, coming from a home environment.
I think one piece that maybe also I just want to kind of caution or just throw this out there as we think about starting to gather data about this and starting to conceptualize sort of a longer conversation. One piece that is hard to think of is I think there's a lot of invisibility in whatever data we're going to get, because, for example, if we, right now, when kids are in our school district, we're doing testing on them, we can get that data and we have observations on them directly. When you're talking about kids who are coming from private daycares or coming from home, you're not going to know, it's not going to be possible to get really great data on what's happening in those situations until they arrive. And I think part of it is something.
There's an assessment, right? So that's the spring assessment they do.
So they have
So that's what they're talking about.
assessment.
Right, at kindergarten. But I think
Before they enter. Yeah.
most of the assessments are meant to take place before the age of 3, a lot of them, and we don't participate in any of that. So I've just been through this, actually, and there's a lot of, and with the sort of way that, sorry, I have to think about how to say this, I get the kindergarten is sort of a separate question. I get that there are required kindergarten screenings, but most of the interventions, or a lot of interventions, are actually recommended to take place before that.
But I guess our readout is readiness for kindergarten.
What?
Our readout is readiness for kindergarten, not readiness for pre-K programs, right?
So are you talking about triple EI, the early intervention for IEP type of things, or?
I think that, if you need speech pathology,
Right.
what Katie
Right,
was
that's what I
talking
mean.
about is that intervention, the advent of the intervention would happen at 2.5, and then it would be walked out at around 3, and then it would continue. And so.
And those are the things that help qualify our kids to get into our preschool program.
Right.
So I think that's part of the complexity there, is that
Right.
we do have a program, and we are talking about, if we're talking to ourselves about how well it's meeting our needs, I think it's a little bit deceptive, because we're only catching the kids we've caught. We're only we're saying we're meeting 100% of the need, because any kid who gets identified, we're getting them into the program. But the kids who aren't getting identified until they get to kindergarten,
Well,
we're
it's
not.
well child visits, right? That's what those are for, right?
No.
Or do you mean more?
There's a lot more that's not. Getting caught, particularly in COVID, there's been a huge gap. And in terms of the assessments, the wait time, if something gets flagged, the wait time to actually get assessed is 18 months. at this point. So I just think like I'm trying to call out the fact that we have a real gap in this critical period that's partly due to the staffing shortages in childcare, that's partly due to healthcare shortages. And I think, so the reason I'm saying all this is just to say, I think we should absolutely gather the data, and we should be careful when we get it to understand that it's gonna be like, it's gonna be messy and it's gonna be kind of limited, I think.
And but to that end, we cannot solve, no matter what we do, we are not gonna solve all of those gaps, right?
No.
Like all of those problems, all of those, I mean, the best program that we could possibly come up with reaching
Correct.
most kids is still going to, they're still going to have those gaps. So I mean, it's just,
But to the extent that we sort of think that our current programs are meeting all of the needs, I think that's where I sort of am like, we want to be really careful as we think about
Yeah.
that.
absolutely, that makes sense. So so do you feel comfortable with what we've talked about so far?
Yeah, that
as
we're
far as
going to sort of try to coordinate more with the city, and that we're going to speak with the new superintendent when they come in. I don't really know how to coordinate with the kindergarten screenings and starting
Well,
to
education
gather that
committee
data. Is
We are
that
in the
We're in
education
education
committee, and so
committee.
we're on
And
it.
she'll take care, like, we'll
Yeah,
take
and
care of
I
it.
actually have Mount Lebanon School as my school, and I have been wanting to talk to Katie about that. One of the things that would be really helpful, I think, is getting a clear target of the questions. Because if we had a clear target of the questions, we could start asking them now and getting that data, and then we would be prepared when we have our new superintendent, who did mention in her interview, one of the first things she talked about was early childhood education. So I think everybody is walking in the line with you. We just need to have some other people. And I would say that Vital Communities probably has a lot of data that we don't know about, having to do with early childhood education, because they're cross-state and they already have been doing a lot of that research.
Which
So,
is why it's important for us to
yes,
get on that task force as well.
And how do we want to?
I think talk about this at the joint city task force, because
Okay,
Sean
yeah.
will be there and
Okay,
you can
great.
talk right there. Or conveniently already on that task force, so that was helpful. Yay for us. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna stop now. That is, unless we have any other new business. No? Okay. All right, then, we're going to adjourn. Yes,
Motion to adjourn.
thank you. Motion to adjourn by Steve, second by Mary.